Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another BRAP. It is Wednesday night, and we are back live. Have a lot to talk about. Yes, we're going to discuss the FTC's, I don't know what to call it at this point, but anyhow, we're going to talk about the ABK FTC injunction and the breaking news that just happened. Yeah. At this point, I'll just have to say I am hoping and wishing that this thing ends sooner than later. I know we have an potential August 2nd hearing here at the FTC in the United States, and that could happen. But anyhow, I do have a great panel here with me tonight. I do have returning guests and a first-time guest. Let me introduce first-time guests. So happy to have this gentleman here who I've kind of gone back and forth with on Twitter. But I want to have him on because, one, I wanted to have a conversation with him about this deal and just get different perspectives and have a more level-headed conversation than some of the dialogue we often have on the Twitters. So with us, we have John Wolf, who goes by at @JohnWolfX on Twitter. John, welcome to BRAP, sir.
Thanks. Hey, BRAP. What's up, man? Thanks for having me on tonight. Looking forward to the discussion, man. And I guess you can call this saga the Lena Khan suicide mission saga. Apparently, she's looking just for destruction and pretty much to get curb stomped again. Sending her troops out there for a losing cause. But that's my opinion, and look forward to talking more about this.
Yeah, and by the way, we had some great conversation, a pre-show, which I was thinking, I was like, geez, we're basically leaving money on the table at this point. But no, definitely look forward to having some additional dialogue with you about this deal and talking about the latest updates. But also with me, have a returning guest, Falky. David Faulkner's with us. Falky, look, I'm just going to assume that Planet Earth made it to Thursday.
Yeah, mate. Thursday is a crackingly good day. Sun shining, nice and beautiful temperatures. It's excellent. It's brilliant. You should try it.
Yes, no, and Falky, the one thing that I have to say is with you, I do envy the fact that you live in Australia because you do hit the weekend faster than we do here in the States.
Yeah, the downside is it finishes earlier as well.
This is true. Yeah, that is the downside. But great having you back on here, Falky. And then we also have returning guests. We have BG, who did change his name. It was, I won't say it, but long something else. But anyhow, BG, welcome back to BRAP. How are you this evening?
Hey man, I'm great. It is great to be back. I guess we're here to discuss the 2-year conversation. That won't go away.
Yeah, this is like, John mentioned like Lena Khan and the losing cause. I'm at a point now where I kind of just, like you said, BG, this has kind of been a 2-year conversation. I am, looking forward to this just being over and done with, and get back to more of the conversation around gaming, because there actually has been some gaming related news this week that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about. I think Xbox had their idea Xbox show this week, if I'm not mistaken, right?
They did.
Yeah. And so I actually did not get a chance to watch that. I actually was on vacation early in the week. But Falky, did you get a chance to watch ID at Xbox?
No, I didn't. And funnily enough, there's been very little media coverage outside of IGN on what went on there.
Yeah, that's true. I've actually heard that from I believe it was E who mentioned the same thing, which is kind of interesting. But there was that. There was also Xbox rolling out this new voice reporting feature where users can emit 60 seconds in-game voice chat clips in violation of community standards for review. Which if you've been in those Call of Duty chat rooms, I always mute the chat rooms because they get pretty, pretty spicy. BG, do you play Call of Duty?
No, not online. I never really cared for the online. I play all the campaigns though. I'm that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, John. What about you? Do you dabble in Call of Duty online multiplayer?
Yeah, I do. From time to time, after work, I like to jump in, jump in multiplayer. And yeah, it's a little weird that they're going to be monitoring voice and all that good stuff. But I guess that I mean, it's no secret that those lobbies can get pretty toxic, and sometimes it's good banter. Like I like to have back and forth with people, but sometimes it's downright kind of cringe-worthy. So I don't know. I haven't really read or looked into it much to see what it is they're going to be doing today. But if it's something that's gonna, I guess, make the playing experience a little bit better, we got to see. I feel 50-50 on kind of what things should be censored and what things shouldn't. So it really all depends on what they're planning on doing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. You're right. Like the chats, like there's sometimes there's some friendly banter, which but sometimes it's just downright toxic, which is bad. Like it's bad when you hear like a 10-year-old like dropping F-bombs and telling you they're going to teabag you.
Yeah.
Like I've heard that. Go ahead, Falky.
They don't have that. There's nothing original. It's all been said before. Back in the early days online when you could start talking to people, there was some genuinely good trash talk that occurred. These days, they just dive straight to, I'm going to do your mum sort of commentary.
Yes.
And there's no thought or originality to it. Yeah, they go straight to it. There's no... They don't bother with the gradual build up and then get the few wins and a couple of kills, and then when they get to that KD ratio, they just unleash and just go for broke on it. They just go straight to the maximum from the start, and there's no fun in that anymore.
Yeah, if you really wanna like listen to people like almost make you cry, you join a Counter-Strike voice chat. These guys are now. Those guys are creative. I can appreciate that. Okay, when they made me say, "Holy shit, did you just say that?" I can appreciate that. But yeah, some of that stuff that you listen is kind of cringe, dude. So
yeah, the kid, the 12-year-olds they haven't developed the ability to do that mental get in their mind. I used to love playing with guys that they'd just be for hours on end just picking people to pieces mentally, to the point where people would just get in games, they'd just run out and get shot so that they didn't have to play. Like I've seen some people just do some crazy shit and never be insultive, just pick people's minds apart in games. It's awesome. And it's a lost art. We don't do it anymore. No,
we don't. It is a lost art. Yeah. By the way, I apologize to everyone in the live chat. Did not welcome the live chat. Give a proper welcome. Thank you everyone in the live chat for joining us. Really appreciate it. And actually, do me a quick solid. I'm going to drop the link here in the live chat. And if you could do me a solid again and just retweet the link or post it on your favorite social media platform. But my trash hockey days, I just don't partake anymore. I feel like I'm just too old for it now. I'm just like, I'm going to let my gameplay do the talking. And so, and that's it. And what's interesting, playing Halo Infinite multiplayer, I was surprised to see people still teabagging. And I'm like, well, that's still a thing now? Like in Halo Infinite? I guess it is. I mean, I didn't play much of Halo 5 multiplayer, but it's funny. Like it was myself, Slow-Mo Backslap, and B-Money. Not B-Money, I'm sorry. B doesn't play Halo Infinite. And Game Logic. And Forte would join us on occasion, and people would just like come and teabag us, and we were like, what? Of course, that would trigger Slow-Mo a bit. He'd just go on a rampage and just start killing everyone. Slow-Mo is actually legitimately King KD. I know he's not here yet. Hopefully he joins here in a little bit, but I call him King KD because Slow-Mo's actually pretty good at first-person shooters, like really good. So anyhow. So this is interesting that Microsoft is doing this. This is a direct quote from Dave McCarthy, corporate vice president of Xbox Player Services. He said in this announcement, when we looked at the next important step in our safety innovation, our team targeted in-game chat because it is often the place where players have the highest opportunity to interact with players outside of their friend network. And Call of Duty right now does give you the option to mute the entire chat. You don't have to listen to the back and forth, some of the as John said, some of the cringe insults that take place there. Dave McCarthy also said, we want players to feel comfortable jumping into any multiplayer chat, feeling supported and welcome. And if they experience or witness inappropriate conduct, they can take action. He also adds, our work is never done, and that voice reporting is one of those new features that Xbox is working to improve community safety measures. So it'd be interesting. I guess I kind of take that last thing there as maybe there might be some other feature sets that they roll out outside of voice record. I'm not sure. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that they could work on to improve community safety features. John, is there anything that kind of pops in your head that maybe they could work on?
This feels like it's two generations late, by the way. Like,
yeah,
because most people, are in their own private party chat in Discord.
That's true.
I don't know anybody that's like actually listening to in-game chat anymore. So this would have been most useful two generations ago. This just feels kind of pointless now, honestly. I don't really know the utilization. I guess if they want to make their online more welcoming for some reason, sure, I guess it has to be something that triggered this. This isn't just random. I don't know. Something motivated them to do this.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm sorry, not BG, because there are safety measures in place, or they are things that you can do. Like I just mentioned, you can mute the entire, chat room. Before you go into a match in Call of Duty. But like you said, there's also party chat now, where you could just play with your friends and that's it. You don't have to worry about anything else. So it's. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. This does feel a little bit late because there was times where we didn't have that party chat. I mean, I remember for those who didn't know, it was an Xbox Live beta tester 20-something years ago. I remember the early Xbox days on the original Xbox, the Xbox 360. I mean, you didn't have that luxury of muting people. I mean, it got downright ugly sometimes in those chats. So it's interesting that. That they're rolling this out now. I don't disagree with you, BJ. I think it's a great point, actually. It seems a little bit late, I guess. Yeah.
I think that from a business standpoint, let me jump in for a second.
Go ahead,
from a business standpoint, I think that what Microsoft is trying to accomplish here, I think that they're trying to check off a box. To be honest with you, we know that companies nowadays, they have certain metrics that need to be kind of and boxes that need to be checked out with inclusivity, all that good stuff. That's kind of mandated on them nowadays, and I think that this is another way of them saying, you know what, we looked at our data. I guess you can say that they're getting a lot of reports for, I guess, bad behavior, what they deem bad behavior, probably a bunch of crap that they see reports on, like racism stuff and all this just crap that people do, because obviously they're hiding behind the mic. They're not going to say this. They wouldn't say some of this stuff to someone's face, right? So I think that they see all that data, and I think that this is just a way for them to say, look, we're doing something to address it and kind of gain good, I guess you could say, not only publicity, but at the same time check off boxes. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like a business in that kind of sense of it. So I think that it kind of kills a couple of birds with one stone.
Yeah, it could be maybe something related to their CSR, their corporate social responsibility policies. Where like I know they talk about a lot of inclusiveness and that CSR and diversity and responsibility, corporate responsibility. I mean, that could be all of that. That is a reason, like you just mentioned, kind of checking off that box why they're doing this too. So, what I'm curious to see if it's really going to curve some of the toxicity in Call of Duty, but I guess we'll see. We'll find out. I don't think it will, but we'll certainly find out. So before I get to, because I know everyone is in the live chat is here for, as BG said, the conversation has lasted 2 years, which we'll get to soon. But there is some other gaming news that was out there this week. I know we talked about ID at Xbox and Microsoft implementing this voice capture feature for safety. But also Naughty Dog's co-president retires after 25 years. Evan Wells, who worked for Naughty Dog since 1998. Geez, 1998, believe it or not, seems like it was yesterday for me at least. I don't know how old everyone here is in the panel, but it doesn't seem like too far long ago, where I was, in my early 20s, and yeah, I mean, he was there in 1998, and I was, I think, 21 at the time. So I'm just dating myself here, but anyhow, Evan Wells actually became co-president of Naughty Dog in 2005, along with Stephen White, and is now, as I mentioned, leaving Naughty Dog. So that leaves Neil Druckmann, who's co-president of Naughty Dog there. Druckmann added that Wells' love for the studio and inspired leadership will forever be part of our DNA. So, any thoughts on him leaving? I just think this is just someone who's been in the industry for 25 years and is just looking for a change. I don't see this as any issue per se. I saw some people saying, "Uh-oh, President Naughty Dog left," but I didn't take that this news as that. Any thoughts on the panel on the Naughty Dog co-president Evan Wells leaving, retiring after 25 years, should say?
He's been doing game development for over 30 years, so he's at least somewhere in his mid to late 50s. Christ, I'd be looking at retirement at that age as well.
I'm thinking he's probably older than 50s. Yeah.
What's left? Yeah. What's left to do? It gets to a point where it's the same thing day in, day out. If his creativity or his desire to be creative is probably hit a peak, it's at that point, he's basically taken whatever money he wants. They'll pay him whatever he asks for. So if it's a challenge in somewhere else and he's up for retiring to do something else, well, good on him. It certainly doesn't come across as he's cracked the shits and walked out because he can't get along with Neil. They've been working together for nearly the whole time both of them have been there. So
yeah, that's true.
Good opportunity for someone new.
Yeah, and to your point, go ahead, Falky.
As you say, it's always an issue in creative circles, and particularly with game development studios, that when individuals outstay their creative capabilities, we end up with stale games or stagnant development pipelines. And I don't think it's a bad idea for those that have success and do well to then move on to something different to challenge themselves and give somebody else an opportunity to have a crack. We wouldn't have got, as an example, we wouldn't have got God of War Ragnarok being what it is if Corey Barlog had stayed on as the director for that. Likewise, we've had with Xbox games, there's been some absolute crackers that have come about because they've had a change in creative leadership, and should be done more often, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah. Go ahead, BG.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, listen, 25 plus years. I think it's safe to say that he's had a whole, very fulfilling career. And especially at like one. Well, he might have been in another studio before that, but since he was like young in his career, he spent like at one studio. That's usually rare. Like you almost never see somebody be at one studio for that long. That's not a thing. So yeah, it makes sense for him to want to retire at this point, whether he in his 50s, 60s, like, yeah, he's probably ready to just enjoy life. So that's all I think that is.
Yeah, that's a great point, BG. And I actually, I've shared this on the show before. I actually interviewed with ZeniMax Bethesda, almost went to go work for them. And one of the things that the assistant VP of talent acquisition said to me was that, once you get your foot in the door in the gaming industry, he's like, you can pretty much go anywhere you want because you're in, right? But he said it's a very incestuous industry where you see a lot of people move around. People really don't stay long at a particular studio because they either move up for upper mobility or they want a new challenge, or sometimes people want to get out of the industry. I did see just from a TA perspective, I did see some people. I would say towards the latter part of the last year, seeing more people on the development side looking to leave game development and go outside the industry. We were starting to see some of those folks in some of the TA pipelines that we were working on. So, but yeah, that's a great point, BG. And he actually did work for Sega as well. He was actually a lead tester at Sega, programmer, lead designer there. His first project at Naughty Dog was actually developing Crash Bandicoot 3, which God, it's amazing to see Naughty Dog go from Crash Bandicoot, Jack and Dexter to The Last of Us. But BG, that and actually BG, before I have a question for you. Before I get to that, I do want to welcome B Money. You just joined us. What's going on, B?
What's going on, fellas?
So
Not much, B. I did. Did you see Slow-Mo and Gaby Forte playing that game that's not really a shooter?
Nah,
a good shooter?
Stop hate, man. Stop hate. Yeah. I saw Slow-Mo's clips, man. He was getting busy. You know, I've been trying to tell y'all to get on Battlefield for quite a long time. So it was nice to see the boys jump on there and do the thing. So
yeah.
Battlefield has come back from what it was when it released.
Has it really been?
Everybody was shitting on it when it first came out, and rightfully so. It was not the shooter that it should have been, but over the past year, man, it's definitely come back to form, and it's definitely worth playing.
All right. Is anyone else on the panel playing Battlefield?
No.
Okay.
No, I suck at first-person battles.
What about you, BG?
no, I mean I'm a huge Battlefield fan, but man, once they messed up in the beginning, I have gone back just to see the progress and played like 3, 4, 5 matches, but I've never stayed with it. It's just hard to actually fully get back into a game after they botch the release. So yeah, but it is a way better game than it was at launch. It's a completely different game as well. So.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess, I was, and I reason to ask the question, BG, because I know B's a big fan, and not that I think B was lying, but I just wanted to get a different perspective. So, I did see, I don't know what map Slow-Mo and Forte were playing, B, but the thing that I didn't like about Battlefield is I don't care for all the vehicles, like that just doesn't do it for me. So, were they playing in a map that had a lot of vehicles? Because I think there's some modes where you could play without the vehicles, right?
Yeah. There's different game modes that you could play that don't have any vehicles, where it's just all out. Kind of like boots on the ground warfare.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I mean, you can avoid the vehicles. And I didn't really pay attention to what map they were playing on, but it does look like they didn't have any vehicles on the map, because I didn't see any major explosions or anything like that. But you can have it either way. You know what I mean? That's one of the great parts about Battlefield is if you want that experience, you want to see a bunch of buildings blow up, you can do that. And if you just want a standard team deathmatch or objective based PvP game modes, they have that for you too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I used to play Battlefield many years ago. I think which Battlefield was it, B, that it had? Was it Metro? Was that one of the maps?
Yeah,
was that Battlefield 3?
Yeah, that was on Battlefield 3. But
yeah,
they have brought in over a lot of maps from Battlefield 2 and 3.
I think Battlefield 4 was the peak for me personally, in the Battlefield series.
Oh, Battlefield 4 was? Yeah, 4 was pretty good.
Yeah,
that was pretty good, yeah.
That was the peak for me.
It was 3 for me.
Yeah, 3. It was 3 for me, and then 4 started to tail off. 3 had the best destruction.
Yeah, 3's destruction was great, yeah.
Yeah, but they had the best destruction and the best maps. So
yeah. Well, I primarily with 3, I think I only played Metro and maybe one other map or two, because Metro was just, I love Metro, because there's no vehicles. You had to, I think the combat started off like in an open field or something, and then you had to push back and get into the subway tunnel and push back different parts of the subway tunnel. So that was my favorite, and I think like that map was Battlefield 3 the first to do like the 32 versus 32 and do it well, like where like it works pretty smoothly. There weren't any issues, because I feel like maybe some of the previous other Battlefields they tried that didn't work as well.
I'm trying to think if it was on Bad Company.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But I remember playing Bad Company 2. Was it Erika Harbor?
Yeah, Eureka Harbor.
Yeah. Well, I will say I did like vehicles in that map. Yeah, go ahead, BG.
Yeah, no, I didn't have anything else.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure if they were the first to do that map size. I feel like there might have been some other games before them. Might have.
Yeah, I think you're right, BG. There was actually a Black Hawk Down game on the original Xbox. I don't know if it released on PlayStation, but I think that was 32 versus 32 maybe. But it was basically you were in vehicles and the vehicles were on a rail basically, and that was it. And that wasn't that good. So,
Hey, Brap, did you completely move on from the Evan Wells conversation?
No, I just kind of went off the beaten path here. No, I haven't completely moved on because I did have I did have a question for BG specific to Naughty Dog, but go ahead, man.
Yeah, just real fast. I'll stir the hornet's nest a little bit. All right. I'm not saying I believe this, and I'm not saying that obviously this happened. Is anyone here willing to entertain the idea that it's a little funny that Bungie has kind of come in to all these I guess you can say Sony development houses and kind of clean shop? Obviously Jim Ryan has put Bungie there for a reason, and it's to come up with the strategic planning for the gas games, right? Anybody find this news to kind of be weird and maybe connected to that, or is everybody here in the mind that this is just something that was in the works and has nothing to do with that? There's nothing to see here. Move on.
Yeah, I think that could have played a part, maybe. You know what I mean? 'Cause I think anytime when you have someone come from the outside and kind of critique your work and have it affect what actually goes on, in your studio, that's going to ruffle some feathers, and it's going to have people, looking at Sony's leadership with the side eye, because prior to Bungie getting there, Naughty Dog they were initially they were the top dog of PlayStation Studios. They were kind of known as PlayStation's best studio. So when you have an outside studio come in and kind of critique your work and basically get your game shelved, people are going to feel some type of way about that. So I think that could have played a part in it, but it's nothing that we could say emphatically.
Yeah, I mean, we can't confirm that for sure, but again, it's just a thought.
Right.
I mean, I don't see any connection. Just because once again, it's like 25 years. He's old. He's been there forever. And I don't think that Evan Wells specifically had much involvement. They're the president, they're the heads of him and Neil are the heads, but I don't think they had their involvement directly in the multiplayer was that involved. If this was if this had something to do with Bungie, affecting their single player games, absolutely. But the multiplayer, I don't really think he honestly even cares that much about the future of factions. Honestly, even as president of the studio, I don't think he cares that much.
Yeah, I kind of agree with BG. I think just given the tenure here, I just think he's just ready to leave. He's not just his work at Naughty Dog, but he's been in the industry for quite some time. As I mentioned earlier, he was with Sega, as a I think was QA tester. I think was one of his. Let me go down here real quick to the article. He was a lead tester and then programmer and lead designer. Yeah, so he worked himself up the ranks at Sega. So he's been in the industry for a long time. But BG, let me ask you a question. When are we going to see factions? Like that.
Oh man,
this is. I gotta be honest with you. It's one of the things that Sony's kind of disappointed. Sony really hasn't disappointed me much this generation. But outside of their messaging with early this console generation, when the upgrade path was terrible, the messaging on that was terrible. But this whole thing with factions is I would say it's probably one of the most anticipated games or game modes that PlayStation platform owners are anticipating, and we haven't heard anything.
Yeah,
Anything
I'm
new, I
kind of
should
like,
say.
I mean, I've kind of said like, oh, I'm not going to talk about factions, but since you're asking the question, because I was like, yeah, the next time I'm even acknowledging factions is when they actually show gameplay. But I think they tried to do too much with factions, and that's why it's taken too long. Meaning that factions was a, you know, in the original was a PvP game. Simple. That's what it was. Now they're trying to make it into more than that, into a game with PvP, but also like this whole co-op experience, like almost like an expansion of the single player experience, but you can play it with friend or your friends, as the reports have said. And I think they've done that to coddle the PlayStation fans who are very anti-multiplayer and act like multiplayer is the boogeyman. I think they're doing it to coddle them because, you know, they just cry about anything that's multiplayer or co-op, and they just act like they're completely anti and against it all the time. So I feel like they felt like they had to, like, okay, we got to do more than just a PvP game, and that took longer. And they're like, I think they're even have to do like mocap. It's almost like the production of one of their single player games.
Yeah,
and that's making it take longer. And I don't think they needed to do all of that. I think that's just a big part of the problem. Mocap and coming up with dialogue and at least half a story for this. And I'm like, all that is just so freaking unnecessary, man. That's not what factions is about. Anybody who's a factions fan, I guarantee you that that's not what they care about. So, but they decided to go down that route and expand it, make it way more than than just a PvP multiplayer game. And game development is unpredictable, and that's what happened. That's what I think happened. And then Bungie came in and said, "Hey, you're gonna have to do a little bit more than what you showed us." And here we have it. I think that's what happened.
Yeah, I want to go to Falk. I see your hand raised there.
I was going to ask something
B.
before Falk, you jump in. So we know the original game, The Last of Us, came with the multiplayer. How do you think they were going to roll out this new faction? Do you think it was going to be a free to play model, or was it going to be something that they try to sell?
I see. At first, I was worried that it was going to be free to play, and I say worried because I don't like the free to play model. I honestly would rather pay for something up front than because people. I think people get kind of like they hear the word free to play and think, oh, great, but you're going to pay for it later. And I mean pay for it later, both figuratively and actually. Right, because there's certain things and ramifications that come with a free-to-play game, because then the game's development becomes all about getting you to pay for the game on the back end instead of just worrying about creating the best game possible and all that stuff. So, what was your question again? Because I just went off on free-to-play.
So, do you think they're going to release it as a free-to-play, or are they going to try to sell it? I definitely think they're gonna try to sell it based on like stuff that we've learned recently, like just how much like production value they seem to be putting in it with like mocap and the story and all that stuff I mentioned. I don't like you don't see that in most free to play games, and like most multiplayer games don't go that far, like putting all these story elements and this high production stuff in free to play games and multiplayer games in general. So I think they were going to try to sell it. Yeah, and I think was also an issue for Sony, and then kind of the critique of Bungie, because it's like all of Naughty Dog's other games have this high sales volume, and we know like people who love factions, it's a small group. It's not 10 million players. You know what I mean? So for them to come out and sell it, and what they kind of presented wasn't enough. Initially. I think that's why we're going to be waiting for it a little bit longer, because they have to implement all this other stuff to at least put enough content in it to make it worth selling.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Falky. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. The factions, yeah, if we ever see that thing, it'll be a bloody miracle. The issue is, from my perspective, from what I've read and been told, is that it's a passion project for Neil Druckmann, and they're just letting him have whatever time he wants to have in creating that world and that environment and that story and all the rest of it. So that could be years away yet, and there's no rush to get it out. Like you said, there's not a huge number of people are going to play it, so it's basically as it's built, and they're getting much more value out of Neil in him doing the TV show and some other stuff at the moment than they will ever get out of factions. So I would not be surprised if that thing at the next playtest round, if it doesn't blow people's socks off, that they just shelve it and it never happens. That's a genuine outcome from this, particularly if they decide they want to push the button on The Last of Us Part 3 and push that cart really hard. Well, then factions will either get kicked out in a partly built state, or it'll never happen. So there's some other things going on in the background that could have a much larger impact simply than just Bungie coming in from the mechanics side of it and saying, hey, this is working, this isn't working, you got to change all this stuff up to make it more appealing. Noting that Bungie isn't exactly on an absolute tearaway with Destiny 2 at the moment while they're trying to wrap that up. So that was just some thoughts I had on the factions piece. As for the multiplayer, it's probably an overgeneralization to say that PlayStation gamers don't like multiplayer. Gran Turismo.
But why the boogeyman?
Look at how strong that thing is. I don't know. There's a lot
BG mentioned, like it's like people are so afraid that oh my god, PlayStation is investing in multiplayer content. This is the end of PlayStation as we know it. The end of single player games, and I'm like, no, they could.
It's so irrational.
Yeah, it is.
I have a different. I mean, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I have a different perspective on it. Look, I'm not invested into the PlayStation ecosystem when it comes to multiplayer gaming or anything past their first party offerings. The thing is that what I've seen, right, is that especially with I guess one of the good things that has come out of this whole hearing and this whole 2-year fiasco is kind of an insight into PlayStation's operations. And with first party games, which is PlayStation Studios' strong point, which it makes their core audience happy and engaged with their brand, which is very strong, and they leverage that a lot. The thing is that they rely a lot on a multiplayer game and multiplayer games to carry their I guess you could say finances and their engagement to their console as well. So I get BG for what you mean from a core audience standpoint, but the thing is that I think that Jim Ryan, the initiative and Jim Ryan's game plan completely changed, where now games as a service is the first and foremost most important thing to Sony, and they're pushing towards that because they're trying to find that that Call of Duty like game that brings in the revenue. They're trying to find their Fortnite, many Fortnites. And it could be from a business strategy perspective, it could be so that they learned a lot from, I guess, this acquisition that caught them, I think, with their pants down. I think that they learned a lot that they cannot only rely on third-party partnerships and stuff like that, which is good on them to do that, right? But I think that more than that, I think that as the PlayStation, I think that the PlayStation audience, BG, to push back a little bit, I think that they are multiplayer gamers. It's just that, again, the core audience is so champions their first player over the shoulder narrative games so much that that's kind of what, that's kind of what you hear the most on social media and stuff like that.
Go ahead, Falky. Go finish your thoughts. I want to go back to BG after that. Go ahead, Falky.
Well, it's not so much a matter of is PlayStation gamers afraid of playing multiplayer games because 5 of the top 10 games played on PlayStation are, Call of Duty, FIFA, Madden, they're multiplayer games. So I don't think it's necessarily players. And if we all recall a few years ago, just after Jim Ryan took over as the president of SIE, they were getting absolutely smashed up for just having these single-player narrative third-person games. So they go and branch out into all these different types of games and across the board, massive engagement with indies, massive engagement with third parties, and all the stuff that they got criticised for not doing at the time, which they were doing anyway, just weren't talking about it. And now we turn around and get mad at them because they're doing what they said they were going to do. Well, they've never really done MMORPGs or MOBAs or any of those sort of big games, because what's the sense in cutting their nose off to spite their face if they've got things like Call of Duty and Madden and all the rest of them that they don't have to spend any money on, and they make money hand over fist from the games being sold and the microtransactions. Until there's a need to change that, there's no need for them to go and build these games. So different story with some of the other genres, but there's no driver there. The fact that they are trying to take a lot of their IP and turn them into some kind of multiplayer engagement, it's a very big risk. But it's not like they're having to spend hundreds of millions of dollars building some big brand new massive IP to make it happen. They're doing it with current IP that they're trying to leverage off. So the business side of it, it's not as big a risk as many people think. Will it take? Probably not. Is that something that they should not try doing then? Well, if they don't try, they won't know. But we shouldn't be slamming them for not doing it and then turning around and slamming them for doing it. Like, if you don't want to play the game, don't play the game. But other than that, let them cook, let them do whatever they want to do. I'm sure it'll either be good or it'll be bad. It's not gonna impact what I like playing. It's not gonna stop other games that I'm looking forward to being made from being made. It's not an either-or conversation. They're doing both.
Yeah, that's why I feel like it's so irrational, like the fair. Because what I think PlayStation fans are afraid of, which doesn't have anything really to do with them, it won't affect them, is they're afraid of these games failing, right? And if it fails, bro, if it fails, it fails. Like, I don't see why they're so afraid of that. Like, it's the only thing I come up with is like, you're afraid of like what other fanboys saying something bad about the game because it fails. Who cares? Like, if it fails, it fails. Like, there's single player games are just as much of a risk. They have a great reputation of doing it, but I mean, you're not getting another Days Gone because in their eyes, that game wasn't a success enough to warrant a sequel. So I just that part just doesn't make sense to me. That like I think that's honestly what they're thinking about, because I can't think of any other reason you would be mad at this, because like you said, they're not gonna stop making single player games. That would never happen. That wouldn't. If let's say a few of these games that they, live service games, let's say 3 of them, unlikely, because live services, how it goes with them. Let's say 3 of them were massive successes. Even then, they're not going to stop making single player games. Those games would probably fund more single player games. So that's why it's like, bro, what are you mad at?
Yeah. Oh, look at Arrowhead. What's it called? Helldivers 2. That thing's supposed to be out before Christmas. We've seen hardly anything of it. They've started the soft launch marketing with the YouTube videos. that's a live service game. Is it going to be good or is it going to be bad? I don't know. It looks like a hell of a lot of fun, and if it's fun for 6 months, great. What determines it to be a success or a failure? Well, that's the sort of metrics that we don't really know. But if it makes enough money to fund itself and fund something else, then what's to be mad about?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, people are okay if a single player games fail, but if a multiplayer game fails, it's worse. And I'm like, that single player game failing, single player games typically cost more than multiplayer games.
Well, and that's the thing. If you got a single player game, and I know we're getting down the path of costs and shit here, but single player game, $70, right? But then the multiplayer game could be, they've got the opportunity to launch it into a service and then fill it with microtransactions or additional content or whatever it is, or they can sell it for $20 and do the same thing. It doesn't really matter. But I mean, look at Fall Guys. That thing cost them nothing to make. I think it's like a budget of $20 million. Launched it in the service. It's on PC and all the rest of it. Launched it into the service, and people just spent money like hand over fist on the microtransactions in that thing. And it had a bit of fun for 12 months, 18 months, and then it's just sort of died down to its own thing. That's the problem. You get these massive peaks when they start, and then they drop off, and then they go to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. The challenge is timing them so that you, as a platform owner, the peaks only do this. And you can't see what I'm doing, sorry, but they stay at the peak point across multiple games. You don't want to be diving up and then dropping off and then diving up and dropping off. If you're doing this up and down thing, it's costing you money.
I think what the core audience might be scared of, guys, because I've seen, and I've done my fair share of trolling this. I think, and
John,
you guys
you're putting fear
wrong.
to their hearts, man. You got to stop that.
Yeah, look, man. If anybody takes anything I say seriously, like, guys, it's just jokes, okay? But seriously, I think that the fear, right, is that I believe that this is actually a fact. I think that PlayStation's new direction is exactly the last showcase that they put on, and the reason I say that, it's because, again, that is from a financial perspective, multiplayer games, gas games is where the bulk of the money is going, right? So it just makes sense that if they show 5 games, 3 are going to be gas games and 2 are going to be your traditional single player game that they're known for. That's their strength, their bread and butter. I think that where some people may be a little bit upset about that, and I guess I would include myself if I was in that camp, right? Is that, hey, we should have had 5, but because you're pushing this initiative, now we're only getting 2. So again, that could only be my perspective, but that's kind of what I've seen from the feedback, and that's what I think that the fear is. Is that accurate, or I mean, is that not even an afterthought here?
I think John, kind of what you go ahead, BG.
No, I mean, so like I said, I don't think their production of single player games is going to decrease. I think we're still gonna get those, especially because a lot of these studios are confirmed to be working on multiple projects. So I'm just not worried about that. I'm just not worried about that. I feel like it should be we should be okay with getting a good balance of single player and multiplayer. And I think all the panic is just unnecessary, like I said.
Yeah, I think, to your point, Joe, I think they just happen to show X amount of multiplayer games of service type games more so in this showcase than single player stuff, and I think people are taking that small sample size and extrapolating, what the rest of their production pipeline is going to look like, and I don't think that's the case. No, look, I could be wrong. Maybe that's what the pipeline's going to in fact look like, but I don't think that's the case. Is my point. I think that we need to see other showcases before we jump to conclusions, and I think that they can walk and chew gum at the same time. I don't. I think as long as there's a market demand for their first party content, similar to Nintendo, because look, they the one thing that if you look at the sales numbers for Sony first party single player games, they're actually getting to the point now of almost hitting Nintendo numbers. Not quite there, but they're getting to that stratosphere now where they're selling 22 million copies of single player games, first party exclusives. The only other company that's achieving that at a higher clip is Nintendo. So I don't see them necessarily going away from single player games. And I think B, you talked about this when Jim Ryan first took the reins from Sean Layden. You said that he was going to grow the business, and that he was going.
What has happened every single year? What has happened every single year? Every single year we see PlayStation coming out and saying we're investing more in our games. We're investing more in our studios. We're putting another $500 million into our studios. We're putting another, $700 million into our studios. They've done it every single year that he's taken over. And I told you that was going to happen as soon as they made that announcement. Jim Ryan is not the most friendliest guy. He's not going to be the guy who's going to be the spokesperson for PlayStation. He knows the business. And look at what he's done. He's changed PlayStation's business since he's taken over. They've been more profitable than they've ever have been before. This was without any multiplayer games yet. So imagine what happens if they have, like BG said, 2 or 3 multiplayer games that really, knock it out of the park. They're bringing in hand over fist money for 2 or 3 quarters in a row. PlayStation's business is going to go to another stratosphere.
Yeah.
They're going to be able to double down on all the stuff that they do well. So I'm not worried. I've said that from the start.
If they build 10 and 2 come out like Final Fantasy 14 or Destiny 2 or something like that has a decade's worth of engagement at those stupidly high numbers, they will take that as a win. If they get 2 out of 10 for that length of time and in terms of engagement, they'll be fine. They will take that as a massive win.
Yeah, and I gotta say something too. One of the I saw this talking point. I was listening to Reforged Gaming earlier today. I heard this talking point in his chat, and I saw this on Twitter today. People saying that Sony's gotten comfortable. They're kind of resting on their laurels. I don't agree with that narrative. I mean, I don't think you invest in the kind of investment in content, what Falky's describing, what we're talking about in terms of trying different strategies, implementing new strategies, trying to grow the book of business the way B Money's talked about, but also investing in things like the, I forget what it's called now, the remote device for PlayStation. Was it Project Q? Is that what it's called?
Project Q.
Like you're not going to R&D that if you're resting on your laurels. You're not going to R&D or release a niche product in PlayStation VR 2 if you're sitting on your laurels or you're just kind of in cruise control. That is an action or behavior, to me at least, that speaks of a company that's kind of just sitting idle and not doing anything and kind of just being comfortable. I think Falky, I shared some financials with you from PlayStation. I forget what their R&D numbers, but they're actually investing a lot of R&D in gaming, more than they are with any other, I think, aspect of their business, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, that's a bit. You got to really look into the nuts and bolts behind that headline because they're about to start pre-work on the next console, so they've got to start some R&D in that. But when they say, the image sensors aren't having as much R&D and the other things aren't having as much R&D, they spent stupid amounts of R&D on that technology in the previous years, and it's in production and phase and on-sell phase at the moment. So they're not going to be spending more R&D on something that they've just brought to the market. That they'll have a lull there and redistribute the money that was in those last periods into the gaming one at the moment. They've got was it $2.5 billion or something is their total, which is only a 10% increase on last year. So the headlines is just they're fudging it to make it sound big, but it's not overly huge. compared to what they usually do.
No, thanks for sharing that perspective, Falky, because you're right. If you read the headlines, it does make it seem like it's, a significant increase over compared to what they've previously done.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's going to be the most interesting is if they actually go down that pathway of dual GPUs and utilizing those as a proxy servers as part of their cloud gaming solution. That if they can get that to work, that will be some serious magic. It's going to cost them a fair bit of money to do it, and I don't know if it's actually going to be a commercially viable product by the time they work it out. So, but yeah, if they do manage to pull it off and make it cost effective, that thing will be interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, I do want to move on to the final topic of the evening. And let me grab the super chat here. I meant to grab it earlier, but I wanted to hold on to it because I know we were going to be discussing this later today. And Face 23 with the $20 super chat. Thank you for that, Face. Says, even if the appeal does go through and FTC loses in court again, or they don't get the appeal, FTC is not making it easy for Microsoft. So thank you for that super chat. I think
that's the game plan.
Yeah,
that's Lina Khan's playbook.
I was just about to say, John, I think in part this is also to make it difficult for for Microsoft, but also to kind of set a precedent here that vertical mergers, historically speaking, have pretty much gone through with just a hand wave, and I think that, like we talked about before we went live the show here, and we talked about the kind of reining in of big tech and these big acquisitions, these multi-billion-dollar acquisitions of large organizations and vertical mergers have typically gone in and really haven't faced much scrutiny, and there seems to be some evidence out there that with some of the vertical mergers that happen, like in telecom and we're really with ISP providers, mobile phone providers, that those really haven't been, in the grand scheme of things, really beneficial to consumers per se. We've kind of seen that in the healthcare industry here in the U.S. Oil and gas would be another one, energy, but anyhow, but yeah, I think that's in part why they're doing this. But like you said, BG, before we went live, this has been the 2-year conversation now at this point, and the just to kind of do a quick rundown of what's happened. So Judge Corley did actually deny the FTC's injunction request to block Microsoft and ABK from going through with their with Microsoft's acquisition prior to the August 2nd hearing date with the FTC's administrative law judge. And again, that was denied. And people have been asking me for my opinion on this. I can't say I'm completely surprised. I always thought that it might be tough to make an argument that or the argument would be harder on the FTC when they've so focused on Call of Duty and that kind of Microsoft's maybe intent to potentially remove Call of Duty as from being a multi-plat game and make it exclusive. I think that Microsoft could do that. Obviously, one thing that I think was interesting that came out of the hearings was that Microsoft did run the numbers, did run the scenario, the calculations, if you will, of what putting Call of Duty exclusive would look like. And certainly Microsoft could absorb the cost of doing that. They're a large corporation, deep pockets. I don't think they do that though in the short term. But again, if it happens, if this is 10 years from now, if Microsoft says Call of Duty is going to be exclusive on Xbox, I can't say I would be shocked by that. But I don't see that happening, at least in the short term. But today, the FTC, and actually this just was late breaking news, the FTC has decided to appeal.
No, BRAP, I think,
go ahead.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think the correct way of saying this is the FTC has decided to waste more of your taxpayer money. I think that's the correct way to say it.
I disagree with that, John. I think this is part of the process. I don't view this as a waste of taxpayer money. I'm okay with the FTC and other regulatory bodies, for that matter, just doing their due diligence of any large merger and acquisition that could potentially lead to mass consolidation in the future. I'm okay. Like, this is part of the process of protecting the free market, protecting consumers. I don't
even though there was even though there was already 2 phases of review, as as a federal judge looking over the case, hearing all the facts, and still deciding not to do that. You still kind of don't see it as a waste of taxpayer money.
No, I don't. I think this is just part of the regulatory process. Everything we're seeing here is not uncommon or new in the process. This has happened before. I don't know. I don't share that perspective. I think that, and I've said this on the show before. I said, let the process play out, and whatever decision is rendered, and that's it.
Yeah. And I'll respectfully disagree with that, but that's fine. We could disagree. Yeah. Now, and BRAP, I'm sorry that I'm kind of cutting you off and stuff like that. It's just that I have to go soon.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Did you have a particular question about this, so that maybe I can get into it a little bit, and then because I have to go real soon, I apologize about that.
Oh no! I know you said that you actually mentioned you might only have 30 minutes, so I appreciate you stayed longer than that.
Yeah,
John, so I appreciate it.
No worries.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that the FTC has filed a notice that it's appealing Judge Corley's decision. We don't know the regulator's arguments until the full appeal is submitted to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So I just wanted to say. But I guess my question to you, John, like I did see a lot of people saying that that we won, that this is great for gamers, great for consumers. I don't disagree that this is good for Xbox gamers and those in particular that are that have bought into the Game Pass, and play Call of Duty. But why do you like? I guess my question to you, Joe, what did we win? Is my question. And
okay, so
yeah, go ahead.
So overall, obviously, look, you got to look at these things, guys. Companies are going to say what they're going to say to get the win. Everything that was that came out of Phil Spencer's mouth and everybody in that hearing was well rehearsed, well planned, well strategized. Okay. Obviously, if you don't think that, then I think that somebody needs to kind of inform you on how the real world works. Now, Microsoft, of course, is going to push their agenda to try to get the deal. Sony's going to do what they need to do. FTC is going to do what they need to do. But I am of the camp that I can think for myself, and I can make up my own mind when I see BS and call it out. From the beginning, knowing what I know about Lena Khan's initiatives, knowing what I know about the gaming industry, I clearly saw that from the beginning of this whole thing, it was agenda driven, and that is what has irked me wrong about it the whole time. While I agree with you and someone like Lena Khan that oversight of acquisitions and big tech and the big and deeper stuff, of course, that is important. I think that it's been blown so much over proportion, right? And it's okay to think about those things, but again, we got to bring this down and look at things at face value. And that's where the biggest hiccup, the biggest hang up that I have is that if you look at this deal at face value, there's nothing anti-competitive about it. There's nothing that is illegal about it. And the deal, obviously, go through your phases because of the dollar amounts. It's big money. It's the biggest acquisition of all time in gaming. It's Microsoft. All those things are warranted. What's not warranted is this disillusion and this case that for harm that the FTC brought upon, that in my opinion, they made themselves look like fools. It's a losing battle. You're just hitting your head against the wall over and over again. It's a waste of taxpayer money. It's a waste of our time. And more importantly than that, you're just delaying the inevitable, because at the end of the day, the facts are going to speak for themselves. They already did one time in front of a federal judge. And if you don't agree with that, that's cool. But the judge, Judge Corley, looked at the facts. The FTC had a chance to present their case, and they fell flat right on their face, in my opinion, and in her opinion as well.
So what? With what was presented to the federal court judge, Do you consider that to be equal to a full-on review in front of a judge to get a ruling in terms of the actual outcomes? Is that what you're saying?
The FTC had one job going into that hearing. They needed to convince Judge Corley that there may be some type of harm to competition, that they can take their case even further for her to rule that way. They couldn't do it. It goes back to what everybody has been saying since the beginning.
Well, John, let me just interject here. The hearing was to stop Microsoft and ABK from actually completing the acquisition before the August 2nd hearing through the FTC's administrative law, because that's still happening. That's still happening. So in theory, the administrative law judge for the FTC could say, no, you guys, this deal cannot go through, and then Microsoft and ABK have to break up.
And does anybody here think that's going to happen?
I don't know.
It's a totally different rule set that they're applying.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I mean, maybe not. I am not one to make those predictions. I've always said this, and just my opinion. I thought this deal would go through. I thought it would go through with concessions, though. That seems to be the case. What may be happening with the CMA? We heard about the CMA, and now negotiating with Microsoft. There might be some divestiture. I can't ever say that word.
Divestiture.
Divestiture. Thank you. Thank you for that.
I'm going to ask you how to say Worcestershire sauce one day, and we'll see how you go.
I don't care. I don't care what those bastards of the UK say about you folks down under, man. Look, no, it's so. Again, I've always said that I think this deal goes through with concessions, some kind of concessions. I think Microsoft, this deal's too big for them to basically mess around, F around is what I want to say. I think they will come to the table. I think they're willing to come to the table. I think concessions with me. I think this deal will go through. Do I think? Now, I'm not a sucker either. Do I think that Microsoft wants to give any concessions at all to anybody? Of course not. That's not in their best. That's not in their best benefit, right? Yeah. So I kind of agree with with the narratives of, oh, Microsoft is just doing this for the good of everyone. All that stuff, guys. I don't buy into that. I'm looking at the deal at face value, right? I understand everybody's doing what they need to do to get their point across, and Microsoft is trying to finish to get past the finish line. But in my opinion, I cannot. I guess you can say my integrity or whatever you can call it cannot look at this deal and agree with, I guess you can say, the opposition and Lina Khan, an ideological position of just saying big tech needs to be stopped. I don't care what gets put in front of me. I'm going to make it hard for them. I'm going to make them I'm going to put them through the ringer so that the deal collapses. No, that's not the way that things should be conducted, and that's just my personal opinion. So you look at the deal that is in front of you and you base it on the facts of that particular deal. So John, I guess what I mean, I guess my question to you is, what role should the FTC have though in any acquisition? Because that's pretty much what they're there to protect, to do their job. Well, that's what they're doing though. Well, no, they're not doing their job. What they're doing is they're being their job has transformed into an agenda riddled, I guess you can say, mission statement that we're going to make it hard for these acquisitions to happen. The fact is, Lina Khan has come out on record and said, we don't care if we lose in court. When you make statements like that, you're not making those statements based off reason, logic. You're pushing agendas. Well, and I'm not okay with that. John, I think the reasoning though is because there have been, I think we're at an inflection point right now, and I think that what's happening is we can't treat, presumably the regulatory bodies, especially the big ones, don't believe that we could treat big tech the way we have with previous vertical mergers in mobile. And the thing is, once you let the cat out of the bag, it's very hard to put the cat back in the bag. You look what's happened in the mobile space, the consolidation of mobile. You look at the consolidation of ISP providers, healthcare here in this country, in the U.S. particular. Falky, I don't know if there's any examples in Australia where there's been mass consolidation that's hurt consumers. If there is, please let me know.
Lots.
Yeah, but those things aren't easy to put back into the bag, you know. And I don't have an issue with them questioning these things. I mean, we historically speaking, John, if you look at of course, I don't disagree with you. It's agenda based, but it always has been historically. Any FTC, any political party that's been in control of the United States has a different agenda in mind. That does, and that's why Biden tapped Lina Khan on the shoulder at a very young age, I might add, to head up the FTC because of the concerns and want to rein in big tech and kind of revisit this idea of, should we allow vertical mergers to just pass through without any rigorous stress test? You know, is that really beneficial to consumers? You know, and throughout history, in the U.S. history, and throughout, I would imagine this is probably true in Australia, Falky. You know, there's inflection points, whether it's regulatory, whether it's laws. I mean, if you look at different laws here in the U.S. that have changed, look at Roe vs. Wade more recently here in the U.S. You know, we hit points in history where we revisit things, we talk about things, and things change. Sometimes to the detriment, sometimes not to the detriment of the people, or in this case, consumers. I don't personally have an issue with them saying, hey, you know what? Let's pump the brakes here on mass consolidation or vertical mergers, because look, we have tangible evidence that when we've allowed vertical mergers to happen in some of the industries I just mentioned, and Falky, please chime in and give examples of vertical mergers in your country that have negatively impacted consumers. But those, in fact, haven't been beneficial to consumers. Again, Falky, I know we talked about this in great length, but you know, anytime, you know, and I think this is what maybe basic economics, Falky, I think you might agree with me on this, but anytime you remove suppliers from the market, that ultimately leads to less consumer choice. And I don't have a problem with them doing their due diligence and saying, wait a minute, let's maybe pump the brakes on this thing. And to your point, John, by the way, I don't have an issue, John, if you say, hey, you know what, I don't agree with the FTC. That's fine.
Not in this particular case. And BRAP, look, I respect your view, and even though I disagree with it, I think that honestly, it's a little too deep. It's thinking a little bit too deep about this. Again, look at this deal at face value. And like I told you in the green room, you can have me back on your show when Microsoft decides in the future to buy, if they want to buy EA, Ubisoft, you know, all these things. I might change my tune and I'll tell you, hey, I think that now this is becoming dangerous. And all of those things that you brought up in that conversation are valid now to bring those things up, because now this is getting kind of dangerous. I've always been on the side of this particular transaction, looking at this transaction at face value. Do I buy Sony's BS and Jim Ryan's BS that this will put them out of business? No, that was proven on emails that even he wrote. Okay, I saw someone put in the chat that the hearing revealed that Microsoft has secret plans and emails to outspend Sony. Of course they do. Sony has some of those same emails probably when they're talking about how to I guess you can say strategize a particular foreclosure on Microsoft, which is signed first party exclusives for 1 to 2 years. It's just the nature of the beast. And I think what happens here is that where the disconnect is for the community, right, where we always see the BS BRAP that we were talking about in the green room, is that we I guess since we don't really understand the business from like that sense that we're not in on it, we can only see what is reported and what gets leaked, and we can make judgments on that. And I think that, again, my stance on it is just looking at this deal at face value. This has no reason to be appealed. FTC, take the L. You lost again in court. You're gonna keep on losing. I understand it is agenda driven, but if someone doesn't agree with that, I'm sorry, but they're selling you a story.
So I'll pose this to you then as a question. You want to take it on face value. On face value, you're saying there's no reason to oppose this, right? So it goes through and it sets a precedent. Yet, so if you set the precedent now, how do you stop it from happening in the future? So you set the precedent now with ABK, What stops Microsoft or anybody or Sony, for that matter, from going, right, precedent's been set, I'm now going to buy EA, Take-Two, and Ubisoft, and I'm going to do it all in one hit?
Great question. Because every transaction needs to be looked at and analyzed at face value. You look at what's in front of you. You look at what's in front of you.
That's what I mean.
The precedent's
been set.
But well, John,
there isn't a precedent for this yet. So if they set the precedent, they try to challenge it, they can go through with it.
Right, and I'm sorry to cut you off. I don't mean to keep on interrupting you, but the precedent has already been set, guys. There's been consolidation in the games industry since the Nintendo's, Sega, Sony, when they first got into. But this is what's scary about this, guys, is the dollar amount, and I understand that.
Well, John,
the dollar amount.
So I hear this argument a lot from people who say, well, Sony's locked up exclusivity deals. Sony's bought studios. Nintendo's done this. I don't disagree that those things have happened, but the scale and scope of those things aren't a one-to-one to what we talked about in the green room. When you combine the revenue of two publishers who are part of that, that top 10 of publishers accounted for 70% of revenue in the gaming industry, you're consolidating those two powerhouses into one. That's never happened in gaming. And to Falky's point, I do agree with him, because we've seen this precedent with other industries where mass consolidation has been allowed to happen. Once you allow this to happen, and then Microsoft goes to acquire EA next, or Take-Two, it's a very, very hard argument to say, no, this can't happen, when that legal precedent has been set that you've allowed this acquisition of this size to happen already.
I disagree.
Microsoft's easily going to say, hey, this has happened already. Now, and that's kind of, I think, the point of the FTC, the point of why this deal is getting scrutinized, because I guess what I'm concerned about too, and this is kind of another sidebar conversation, is that, look, if you're for this deal, fine, but I do caution people about mass consolidation, or the potential of accelerating consolidation in the industry, because for the reasons Falky mentioned, like once you open this lid up, you got to remember the CEOs of these companies have fiduciary responsibilities by law to make, to make their shareholders money. And if you don't think that EA is looking at this and this deal goes through, and the shareholders at EA are going to top the CEO on his shoulder or her shoulder and say, hey, we need to start seeing and putting feelers out who might be interested in acquiring us for X amount, for money well worth north of what our stock value is, so we can cash out and make money. And if the CEO says no, go ahead, BG.
Yeah, no. So I don't pay attention, as I've said, to the actual court case and the business and all that stuff. I ignore, I literally avoid it, right? So I don't get into all that stuff. I look at it, all of this happening from the gamer perspective. That's what I care about. That's what I think matters. And so I look at it from, in my opinion, I think developers, development studios, are fair game. Buy up as many development studios as you want, because, and I'm talking about anybody, Microsoft, Sony, whoever, a new development studio literally pops up every other month, right? So even if you buy a whole bunch of them, bro, another one is going to replace that one. So the consolidation isn't happening as much, right? Because it's balancing out. It's like nature's healing itself. Publishers don't come up every other month, even every other year, right? The major amount of publishers that we have now is the same amount of publishers that we had maybe 10 years ago or something like that. So publishers don't come up that often. That's my thing about it, is when you buy publishers, that consolidation is not fixing itself, and consolidation leads to, the murder of innovation and creativity. So I don't want anybody to really buy a publisher. When they got Bethesda needed bailing out. Bethesda needed saving. I can fully understand that, right? I was like, that's one publisher. But I don't like the trend of it. That's my thing, right? And that's the thing for me. I just feel publishers should be off limits in my opinion from everybody. Developers, have at it. I don't care who you buy. Publishers, I just believe everybody should leave them alone. That's my stance on it.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, BG, and I wouldn't. I didn't have an issue with Bethesda being acquired. They actually they were struggling financially speaking. They were having issues. But this idea of acquiring big publishers, that's concerning to me. I also wouldn't want Sony to be if this was Sony, I'd be like, hell no, I don't want Sony buying ABK, or I don't want Sony acquiring EA. My other concern too is that this now we create an arms race, and people are already complaining about third-party exclusivity deals not being fair. Look, if you think that Sony's going to sit idle and sit on the sideline and allow Microsoft to just consolidate more and not be maybe more aggressive with their second or third-party exclusivity deals, I could see them be more, more aggressive in that regard. And frankly, they can be because of where they sit in the market. Whether you agree with that or not, it's fine. But that's
more of a.
Go ahead, Bob.
Sorry, I've got the bloody delays come back in. It makes more of a sensible strategy for PlayStation to not engage in that let's go and buy everything, and to just engage with talent at a lower end and support them. Like that showcase the other day, a lot of people give it a lot of shit. I'll just rattle off some numbers just to give you some context. I think it was 32 games shown. 26 of those games have got XDev heavily involved in them. 28 of those 32 games were new announcements, or were officially new announcements, and 11 were exclusive. And most of them weren't from a major publisher. So there's their ground game here from PlayStation is how they're going to compete against these bigger acquisitions, because it's more cost effective for them to just grab the talent, support them in setting up their own new studio, and start pumping out AA level games like Canterbridge of Spirits and Stray and whatnot. And people will scream and complain about it, their exclusive deals. But if you're paying someone to build something for you, they shouldn't then be able to take what you've paid them to develop and then sell it to somebody else. That's just ludicrous to think that that's an okay thing to do. If it's from inception, great. If you're paying and fully funding it and paying for something to be built for you, it's no different to going to your house builder and saying, hey, I want you to build me this custom house. Because if he went and then built it for somebody else and was making money off your designs and your technical inputs and all that sort of stuff, you'd be pretty mad about it too, wouldn't you? So it's going to be and they're very different business strategies. And fair enough, I carry on a bit about business strategies and whatnot, but what Microsoft is trying to do is think of it like Embracer Group on steroids. That's the pathway that they're taking, and it's a valid pathway. You need massive amounts of IP, that's great, but you still got to build the damn things, and it's very expensive when you own it to get it built, if you got to do it all in-house, particularly if you've got an overhead as big as Microsoft's. Whereas you go down the other option, which what Nintendo and Sony, Amazon and Apple seem to be all attempting to do, which is not necessarily IP ownership, but it's selective engagement with buying in or getting talent to build something for you, where you don't have that huge overhead requirement, and you can get teams of 10, 15, 20, 30 people to build something for you in a couple of years. It doesn't have to be the $200 million, mass budget game, because you only want one or two of them a year to come out. You want, for the rest of the year, you need these high-end AA and some multiplayer and some other indie-style games to fill out your catalogue. It'd be great if Microsoft get ABK, but at the moment, ABK's 80% of their money's coming from 3 games, and most of that's coming from Candy Crush. So if they've got all that IP, that's great, but they're going to have to build something. They're going to have to put on a heap of people to build it, and at the moment, they're laying more people off. So I genuinely don't know why there's this... regardless of what ends up happening, you're not going to see anything come out of it for a few years. And it's a completely different strategy to what Sony's doing. Now, yeah, fair enough that Jim Ryan said it was going to have a massive impact to the business. I don't recall, and I'm just saying, I don't recall seeing where he said it was going to, quote unquote, business wouldn't survive. But if you lost $500 million in revenue, of course it's going to have an impact to your business and your strategies going forward. But then, if COD was pulled off PlayStation would lose 500 million. Yep, that's not great for them. ABK would lose 2 billion gross revenue, which would make them about $1 billion loss position. So then Microsoft effectively bought themselves a loss. So there's economics all over the place as to, is this going to be good for consumers? Well, if the gamers go down that pathway of, we want it all exclusive to Xbox, you better get ready to reach in your pocket to pay for it, because Microsoft isn't going to back fund this thing forever. And they've already shown through this recent court case that the acquisition of ABK had to be profitable the day that it came on board. Well, it can't be profitable without PlayStation. So, what's going to change in the next couple of years? Nothing.
Yeah, and and again, from the gaming perspective, one of the reasons why I like developers to be acquired and not publishers is, I believe when an acquisition happens, who you acquire, you should make better. And I think you have a much bigger impact if you buy a development studio than if you buy a publisher. You can make that developer better, whether it's through culture or just resources and money, way more than you can, because honestly, speaking honestly, this is like, what can like Microsoft really do for Activision's games? Seriously, Call of Duty is, for people who love it, is great. Is Call of Duty going to get better under Microsoft? Call of Duty is probably going to remain the same as it is, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not. Call of Duty is, and that's not specifically under Microsoft. That's if anybody were to acquire Activision, Call of Duty probably wouldn't get better, because Call of Duty is Call of Duty. It is what it is, not because of lack of anything, because that's intentionally what it's supposed to be. So that's why, I'm like, bro, from a gaming perspective, that's the part of it that confuses me. Like, I get excited when somebody big acquires somebody small, because I know that small studio, bro, you're about to make that small studio, because the only thing that small studio was probably lacking was funds. They have the talent. Now they get the funds. I'm excited about that. But them acquiring Activision, I'm like, bro, I don't think you can make those developers. They already had everything. But that's why I'm like, oh, that's it just doesn't do anything for me. And it's like, all right.
For me, what's exciting, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but what's exciting about the particular deal, I guess you can say, for Xbox core gamers, even though I'm strictly PCMR these days, but for Xbox core gamers, I guess you can say that there's a lot of dormant IPs that I guess that maybe Xbox, Microsoft proper taking over Activision, those titles can be now, I guess you could say, revisited, where now Activision has become kind of like this factory, rightfully so, because the IPs that they are currently working on make them so much money that I mean, you can't blame them as a company. They're trying to maximize their profits. Like, I mean, BRAP, you mentioned it. They need to make as much money for their shareholders as possible, right? I would like to think, obviously, I don't know this, I would like to think that some of those developers can be leveraged for other properties to bring back other properties.
How would they do that?
Oh, I don't know. That's not my job to figure out. I'm just saying what the hope would be, right? That's one of my concerns, right? And I understand that there's hopes and dreams and wishes, and
by the way, welcome Game Logic to the show.
Hey, and buckets of gold at the end of the rainbow. But there is, for instance, the pragmatic scenario of what is going to unfold does not allow those IPs to be made. And so I don't personally understand why that's a hope and a dream and an expectation. Right? I mean, so right now today, the Call of Duty team is 9 studios, 3,000 people. The scope of what Call of Duty has to do has been expanded. It now needs to do everything that it's doing today, and it needs to deploy a version to the cloud, and it needs to deploy a version onto the Nintendo platform. And those versions have to be harmonized at parity and allow multiplayer play. And I would expect then, therefore, crossplay. So those 9 studios that are engaged in that ginormous production pipeline, they're not going to have any cycles to make those new IP. If the thought is that those IPs are going to be handed off to current internal Microsoft studios, those studios have not been delivering. Based on Phil Spencer's own admission that they haven't delivered on the 12-month plan from last year, and I would contend haven't been delivering this entire generation. So there's again added time that they would require. They're already engaged on games in pipeline, so then pipelining those other IPs in the games is just an even further horizon. So I understand that there are hopes and expectations. I have found that none of those expectations are practical when I run them through the simulator.
Yeah, I think people and listen, I could be completely wrong. All of us could be completely wrong. But I don't see when Activision under Microsoft suddenly greenlighting all these dormant IPs. I don't believe it at all. I think they're going to continue to do what making the games that Activision were making money from before. Like people talking about Spyro and stuff like
it could
Spyro.
Be PG.
Well, the other thing we found out during the trial that they're not going to be integrated in a way that puts them under Matt Booty, right? They're going to be a limited integration corporate merger, which is going to give them the same arrangement as Bethesda, which means based on that arrangement, Microsoft's going to dictate some strategic things, like you have to take this thing exclusive, or certain things at that level. But we haven't seen any practical example where they're going to tell Activision, "Hey, unchain those IPs and start working on them." I mean, and they can't take away from the current production pipeline of COD without impacting COD.
Yeah, fair enough, Game Logic, and I think that you bring up some great points, but like some of the examples that we've seen, right, with the acquisitions that Microsoft has made already in the past, right? Obviously, the most recent Redfall being their fail, okay, being their step on a rake moment, okay? But then you do have a lot of examples where because certain developers have been brought in, the games have been better, the games have benefited from it, right? So at the same time, Xbox, arguably their biggest game of the year, Starfield. If I would think you guys would agree with me that if ZeniMax Bethesda had never been acquired by Microsoft, they would have pushed that game out when Todd Howard originally said 11/11. And it's because again, it's an independent publisher. They need to make money. They need to capitalize, and they need to stick to it. Where Microsoft is more, I guess you can say, equipped to absorb that loss and say, let's hold on a little bit more to this to polish it up a bit, because for whatever reasons, you can say, hey, we want this thing to really shine, or you guys lied to us, you guys told us a date, whatever the excuse was. There's examples there of how being under Microsoft, a lot of games have benefited from it. BG, to your concern. Now again, Redfall.
Can you say which game specifically?
There was reports Psychonauts 2 benefited greatly from it. You have small projects such as we don't know if they would have taken a chance on this game that was just released earlier this year. I'm sorry, I'm kind of flipping up on
Hi-Fi Rush.
Hi-Fi Rush. Again, many examples that to your point, I get where you're coming from, because a $70 billion acquisition as a business, I can imagine that you need that sucker to keep on pumping, right? But again, you're not being bought by a mom and pop shop here. You're being bought by one of the richest companies in the world, with Phil Spencer, who has historically, I guess you can say, has been consumer friendly and listening to kind of the audience. And I would like to think that it is a high chance that some dormant IPs may come back. I mean, I see that as a realistic thing. Now, to your credit, you brought up a lot of good points, but my counter to that is that, I mean, we have to listen to what they say. They've said that this push is for the mobile space. They've said that this push is for et cetera, et cetera. I'm taking what they're saying and I can kind of see where they're looking to expand, right? You might be right in the sense that, hey, is a Guitar Hero coming back? And I wish it would. I don't know if that's realistic or not, right? But maybe we do live in a world where that is a reality. But at the same time, I see your point, because Banjo is a slam dunk if Microsoft was to develop it, and they haven't. So again, we're just talking in theories. We're just talking, what if scenarios or whatever the case may be. But to go back to the beginning, and BRAP, I'm sorry, I do have a hard deadline now that I gotta cut off. Looking at this particular deal at face value, like I've said, I'm just looking at the facts of this deal. It should go through. There's nothing wrong with it, and and I think it's just agenda driven. That's all.
So I think the only difference I'd point out is I think what you said was we were just speculating, and I guess my difference is I'm not speculating on what the future may hold. I'm pointing to historical references of what has actually tangibly happened, versus saying that these things may or may not unfold based on hopes. I mean, the points you brought out, Psychonauts and Hi-Fi Rush, I agree that there was an impact from them having been bought by Microsoft. That wasn't an impact because 343 or the Coalition or some level of technical expertise were flooded to those games to provide them help and support. That was, hey, here's the money truck, go ahead and take the risk, and if it doesn't work out, we've got you covered. And that's a value. And that kind of goes back to what BG was saying, right? That the hope would be that when these studios get acquired, that they would get the financial backing to allow them to take risks and do things. But a lot of the hopes and dreams and a lot of the expectations, not saying yours, but other Xbox fans, are founded on this belief that Microsoft is going to dictate to Activision to have something happen, or that Activision is going to suddenly change course and do something different than what it's been doing. And I'm just saying that we don't have any historical evidence to base that on, based on what has happened with Microsoft's acquisitions to date, and their performance, not just their acquisitions, but their overall performance as a gaming company.
Yeah,
history will tell, I guess.
Yeah, John, you do need to go, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I want to give you a proper outro then, John. John, thank you for jumping on. I appreciate the conversation before we went live, and appreciate your perspective here. I want to have you on too because we were kind of going back and forth on Twitter, but also wanted people to see that people with different opinions, different thought process, whatever, could actually have conversation, level-headed conversation, without some of the crazy banter that we see on Twitter. But so I appreciate you coming on. And joining us tonight, John. Thank you. And
thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And John, I don't know if you want people to follow you on Twitter, but if you want to let everyone know where they can find you, if not, that's okay. But I do want to give you that option.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, John Wolf on Twitter. Strike up a conversation, guys. If you're sensitive to jokes and stuff, I guess don't follow. But if you just want to have a good time, come on, have a gaming conversation like we did tonight. Open to that anytime, guys. I'm also on a show, the Gamers Playground with Kay Asante. Every Monday night, we dig deep into PC gaming. It's kind of like this, an environment where anyone is welcome. Ask questions about PC gaming. We talk graphics cards, just emulation, stuff like that. Swing by and say hi, guys. So thank you again for the opportunity. I know it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but it's just how I feel. All right, guys. Thank you so much, and have a good night, BG, right, David, Game Logic, B Money. Thank you, guys. Have a good one. Okay.
All right, you too, John. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
And I, what I was going to say? Oh yeah. Like the other question, that I, like it's a genuine question. because I know a lot of the the Xbox fans feel like this is a great thing, right? And like I'm genuinely curious, like what is the gain, right? Because the only thing I can think of, right, of what was won or benefited is discounted games and Game Pass. Is that the only thing? Like, I'm genuinely asking. Is that the only thing that is really gained from this 2-year process for $70 billion?
BG, that's the only thing that I could come to. Maybe I'm missing something, but when I saw people reacting to the judge's ruling on the injunction and people were saying we won, I'm like, well, what did we win? And then this is great for the gaming and this is great for consumers. Well, which consumers are you talking about? Are you, because outside of getting, and again, if you're on Game Pass and you play Call of Duty and now you're getting Call of Duty in Game Pass for quote unquote free. That's the benefit, but not everybody is in Game Pass and not everybody plays Call of Duty. As we know, majority of people play Call of Duty on PlayStation and PC. Some play on Xbox. So I'm not sure, BG.
Because,
I think it's just the opportunity to get the game cheap through subscription service.
Because like if that's the biggest benefit of this from the gamer's perspective, I'm not talking about from the company's perspective, then I fail to see how that's worth it for the gamers, paying attention to this for 2 years, right? Because like once again, I look at Microsoft acquiring Ninja Theory, Compulsion, and Exile, these smaller studios who probably had all the talent but lack of funding. I look at that as a way bigger thing in the long run than them acquiring Activision. Like I think that is a bigger deal than this. I get this is a bigger deal because of the amount of money, the amount, the head count and all that stuff. But actual impact to the gamers, I think those smaller studios getting the funding is way bigger. Like, because I look at it as, think about like a lot of the humble beginnings of development studios. And where they are now and the growth. You would have never thought a lot of these studios where they are now that they would have ever gotten to this point. And that was through a publisher or, somebody above them, helping them get to this point. So, like I just think like people kind of sleep on the small studio growing, but they look at the giant, I guess getting the slightly smaller giant. I'm like that, like bro, they're already giant. Activision already had all the money. They had the IP. They kind of had everything except that their culture was bad, and that's why they were honestly purchased. So to me, it's just like, bro, what is this like? What is really gained from the gamers besides discounts? That's like a genuine question for me.
That feeds that valid question. Just to carry on from that is, if you had $1 billion, that's 5 big Sony AAA games over a 5-year development period, right? Mm-hmm. Or that's $110 million games for umpteen studios running 15 to 30 people across a 2-year period. So that if you want to talk about, economies of scale, I completely agree with you, and it's a no-brainer. If you invest the money smartly, I mean, the return on investment for those big games requires massive amounts of engagement, like people to buy it. You can't build a $200 million game, put it in a subscription service and expect to make money out of it. It ain't going to happen. You got to sell it. And if you haven't got a way of selling it and the quality level's not there, well, there's no point doing it. You might as well reduce the input and the investment required to make the game. Now, that's not to say you make a shitty game. Just reduce the investment down to a sensible level and give all these creative development people an opportunity to do something without coming in over the top and applying all this massive corporate overhead garbage to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, BG.
Yeah,
I don't know if you see in the chat. I think someone's engaging you in the chat here.
Activision is not just about the publisher. They have individual teams with unique experience, unique expertise that Microsoft can leverage, like Sony does with Bungie. Leverage to do what?
Didn't they take Toys for Bob off working on Spyro and
They did
Crash
take Toys.
Bandicoot and all the rest? They took Toys for Bob off that to work on Call of Duty.
On Call of Duty, yeah. I mean, unless Microsoft is building a new live service game, or maybe they're going to tap Activision on their shoulders to help them with Halo Infinite, maybe. But I still think the focus is going to be, cranking out manufacturing the titles that they're currently doing right now.
Right. And that's assuming that they're even going to change the plan, because, again, anytime anyone says Activision, straight away you think Call of Duty. You don't think about anything else that they've got. Same with Blizzard. What's Blizzard? Diablo, World of Warcraft. All right, great. What's King? Candy Crush. 3 games are responsible, 3 IP are responsible for 80% of their revenue. No one else is going to get a look in at the moment because they need to satisfy the bottom line for the shareholders. You'll have the same problem, if not worse, over at Microsoft, because they're no longer the main focus. They're at the bottom of the pile, and will still be the bottom of the pile even after this acquisition. Xbox will be right down the bottom, and they will be basically not focused on. And they're left to do their own devices, and as long as they don't run massive losses. As soon as they start running massive losses, the screws will get put on, and the risk of being chopped off is serious. It actually would be more better for gaming if Microsoft sold Xbox to Activision.
Yeah, it's like Boba Fett Gaming, just asked, how do smaller studios help your established big hitters to evolve and continue to grow? They don't. They're not supposed to. The smaller studios are supposed to just grow. That's your job. I think that's the point of the publisher, is to get those smaller studios to grow from doing this little indie or AA game into doing something bigger and better than they did before, versus your AAA big hitter studios are okay. The difference of what your already established big hitter games are going to do from their AAA game to their next AAA game, the jump is not going to be as big as the studio that was smaller that is growing. They're the ones that are going to create the game that has has the biggest difference. If you get what I'm saying. It's not going to be the AAA studio. They're going to keep doing what they've kind of always been doing, especially from Activision. Like, when you look at Activision's games, it's just kind of been the same type of thing. And money wasn't the problem. that wasn't the issue. Like, they needed money. When it comes to Microsoft's games, since Satya, opened up the budget, their problem has never been money. So I just really be curious as what people think is going to change, because they acquired Activision. The funding that they're going to get from these big IPs that are making money, okay, they're going to get that money. But they already had a shit ton of money. So they're going to start greenlighting games they weren't greenlighting before because they have more money. They've been had money. Well, since Satya opened up the wallet, so how was money going to change anything when you had money? I just don't get where people think what's going to really change like that.
Or even how soon it's going to. Again, the big AAA guys, long lead times on game development, hundreds if not thousands of people involved, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars tied up in these things, and they are inflexible. They have to work to very tight, rigid structures and to achieve the outcomes that they're set to achieve. And there's no flexibility in that. If say for example, Naughty Dog wants to go and do some quirky little 2D side-scrolling indie game. Ain't no chance that's ever going to happen. No, they're never going to be going back to develop something like Crash Bandicoot. Not in a million years. They can't do it unless they can internally fund a second studio. But then they'll only get pulled off that to go and work on something else to do with the main franchises because that's their focus. That studio is there to do that job. If you want this other stuff, you've got to have, and again, it's a shame that they're gone, but Pixel Opus. Little studio sitting house somewhere else, just doing their own little thing and having fun doing it, and spitting out a couple of good games. And then if they want to grow, and I suppose Ninja Theory? Not a bad example. They go from a really small studio, they expand their, they broaden their horizon on what they want to achieve, and then so they're funded and not upskilled, but increased in size to be able to achieve that with support. Now, what we see from them looks interesting, and it's certainly something that we want to get our hands on and play it, but we just can't seem to get our hands on it. Housemarque's probably another good example. It went from Resogun to Returnal. It's, just give them the support and uplift them, but you don't want it's something that I talk about a lot that people don't like me talking about is there's a saturation point for the big games, right? And you don't want to be cutting off your, particularly if a lot of platforms make all their money from third-party sales, not first-party sales. You don't want to be bastardizing and cannibalizing your sales in an attempt to try and get more stuff in your first party if it's going to cost you more money than it would to just let the third parties do it and take the money without any investment because it's going out through your storefront. Yeah. There's no sense in spending hundreds of millions of dollars to develop something just to compete with something that's making you money anyway. But at the same time, your bread and butter, like with Sony, PlayStation, for example, they were never going to put a game up to compete against Hogwarts when it got released. And they certainly weren't going to put something up to compete with Final Fantasy 16 when it was released, regardless of being exclusive or not. They're just not going to go up against something that's going to take where the people can have A or B, because they want the consumer to buy the one that's going to make them the most money with the least amount of input. And there'll only be, at most, the saturation point for first-party releases at a AAA level. You wouldn't want any more than 3 in a year, because then you start getting tied up with your third-party major deals and all this other stuff, and they don't have to be exclusive. You just don't want to be tripping over what's going to make you the most amount of money.
Yeah, I'm sorry, PG. Real quick, I got to get some super chats here behind.
Yeah.
JD Gamer with a $20 super chat says, honest question, how many times will the goalpost be moved? Double standards be accepted? Will we allow PlayStation to fail miserably in multiple areas while still saying they only bring quality and claim they're great everywhere? I'm not really following that line of reasoning, JD, but thank you for that super chat. JD Gamer with the $5 super chat says, BG took a lot of heat from his own community for asking for a multiplayer game. PlayStation should supply it. How dare they not? And then you want to respond to that super chat, BG, or?
No, I took, he's right. I did take a lot of heat. I told PlayStation fans they need to, stop bitching about multiplayer games, pretty much.
Yeah.
They really do.
JD Gamer, another $20 super chat says, I'm not okay with the FTC wasting my money. It's not common, and what they are doing in this case is not normal. Oh, my goodness. Oh, boy.
Where all these people have been at?
I don't, JD.
They're living under a rock.
I mean, just vote Republican next election. You got an election coming up. Just vote Republican. Like, I don't know what else to tell you.
Where have they been, man?
I don't know where they've been. They simply are after Microsoft because it's big tech. I wouldn't care if they had a clue about games. They don't. JD, I'm going to respond to this. This is what I said to John earlier. I mean, a lot of the process that we're seeing right now isn't uncommon to the FTC. Yes, the challenging of vertical mergers, that's a different. Typically, historically, the FTC is like vertical mergers pretty much. I forget the analogy you used, Game Logic, when when describing
this
it.
This is not a vertical merger. I'm done having that argument. People calling it a vertical merger are wrong. It is at best a hybrid merger. There's another term for it that if you go back in the annals of the FTC and corporate organizations in America, Microsoft is a publisher. They are not simply buying a supplier in their supply chain in a parent-child relationship. They are a publisher that competes with Activision as another publisher. It is not a vertical merger.
Thank you, Logic.
I have a question when you're done, by the way.
Yep. And then let's see. I think we have a couple more super chats. JD Gamer again with the $5 super chat says, according to the standards that the judge must rule by, which are a lot lower for the FTC in this hearing, the FTC would absolutely lose the trail or lose that trail. You mean trial? JD, the hearing was an injunction to stop Microsoft and ABK merging prior to the FTC's hearing on August 2nd in front of their administrative law judge. I think there's one more super chat.
Hey, JD, you're sitting. So this is a perfect example of your hypocrisy. You're sitting here saying that you don't agree with the FTC, which is headed by an appointed individual by the President of the United States, confirmed by the Senate. So if you're going to agree with the FTC, I'm choosing to disagree with the judge. Plain and simple. We're not going to play hypocritic politics tonight.
All right, then JD with the $5 super chat again says, Wild Wolf says FTC has a bad history. Based on what? What?
Yeah, their win-loss ratio is 15-23 right now. That's not a losing team. As far as I'll have to go back and punch the percentages, but I'm pretty sure that's a team that makes the playoffs.
Yeah, but I'm wondering
maybe a wild card.
Better than the Commanders for sure. All right, JD Gamer says, BG, you're not a Jets fan by any chance, are you?
No.
Okay, I was gonna make a Jets comment, but okay. JD Gamer the $5 super chat says consolidation isn't bad. Matt's consolidation can be bad. This ABK deal is not likely going to meet the standards of law that make it illegal. And then we got a $2 super chat from Cycle Gamer. Now was no way Microsoft will be able to acquire EA after getting ABK. And then go ahead, B.
I said, why not?
Yeah, well, that's what we.
Precedent is set. Why not?
Yeah, that's what we said. Once you open up the bag and the precedent is set, why not, right? Miles with the $5 super chat says Xbox has spent the last 2 years telling us how bad they are at managing their game studios, and you think it's a good thing for them to buy a publisher. I mean, I think there's something to be said for that. Phil Spencer's kind of pretty much said all but that. But anyhow, I think I got JD.
You're absolutely right, JD. They're not right. You choose to disagree with the FTC. I choose to disagree with people I choose to disagree with. So you're not going to stand here and cherry pick and select the so-called authorities on a topic and assert that they're right when it suits your narrative, but then when we disagree with them, move in the other direction and move the goalpost yourself.
Yeah, well, we know we've had some conversation with JD. Tends to do that a little bit, So thank you for the super chats, everyone. I appreciate it. See if there's any other comments here.
Sorry, can I just
go ahead? Yeah, go ahead.
Jump in real quick while you're chatting about that. The FTC's not there. Sorry, the FTC isn't there. Can you hear me?
We hear you.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah, okay, cool. Sorry, the delay. This living in the future thing is a little bit crazy at times. The FTC is not just there to protect the consumer. The FTC is there with multiple different levels of competition protection in mind. Now, I know I said it before, but I'll repeat it. Look at what Embracer Group has been doing. They went through a massive IP acquisition phase. They've now hit the restructure button, which means that they've cancelled a shitload of games and they're going to be laying off a heap of people and closing some studios. Why are they doing that? They need to flick over from the acquisition point where expenditure doesn't matter to now they've got to start paying some loans back and paying some shareholders off. That's a version of what Microsoft is now flagging that they're going to attempt to do. Mass IP consolidation, and then there'll be the layoffs, and then there'll be the games taken away and cancelled, and then there'll be the studio shutdowns and all the rest of it to appease the shareholders in terms of their profitability. And if anyone paid attention to half the information that was in the injunction case over the last couple of weeks, you'll see that that is what they're going to do. They're going to try and outspend Sony for an attempt at different bits and pieces. Now, without going down the pathway of rightly, wrongly, all that other crap that's going on there, if that's the process and the FTC has to take it on face value, where they just say, yep, no dramas, wave it through, well, where's the protection for the employees that are potentially going to lose their jobs out of the back end of this in the first 6 to 12 months? Because there'll be a layer of management that gets asked straight away. And then the games that we're not going to get, or on this promise that we will get, more IP will be developed, it's not going to happen because they're not going to hire the people to do it. They're going to streamline the thing so they can squeeze and bleed money out of it. It's insane to think that on this premise of they're going to be good for the consumer, when it's not just the consumer that the FTC needs to be concerned about. Well, it baffles my mind when people think, it's all about the end result for us, and that paying less means it's better for us. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean it's better for us, particularly if it takes away the volume of product or the quality of the product. And that is a genuine potential here if it remains unchecked, that the precedent gets set and then everything else gets just picked up. But it doesn't mean that Microsoft's going to run off and start buying everything, because they pay this thing out. They haven't exactly got a lot of cash left in the bank. So they got what was it, 100? I haven't seen the latest quarterly results haven't come through, but they're going to fork out $70 billion plus whatever it's cost to settle the damn thing to get ABK, and they only had 110 in cash and cash equivalents. So, and they got to have $20 billion in their back pocket to operate on a month-to-month basis. That's the huge size of their cash flow requirements every month, which means that effectively, once they sign this check and send it over to the shareholders, they're only going to have about $20 billion of cash sitting in the bank. The fuck are they going to buy then? Like, yes, there's other ways of doing it, but the shareholders aren't going to be interested in diluting their share value by issuing shares to acquire companies. And the only other ones that are worth buying are probably going to shop themselves around somewhere else to get a better deal. So it's not just Microsoft that they need to worry about stepping in and buying shit up. They got to worry about China coming after bits and pieces. They got to worry about the Middle East guys coming after bits and pieces, and they certainly don't want Europe diving in on this, because there's some really big cashed up hedge funds in Europe that are just dying to buy stuff out of the US because they can get it cheap.
Hey, Falky,
So,
real quick, are a lot of private equity companies sitting on cash right now? I've heard that. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Private equities are getting.
Absolutely.
I've heard that we could see an uptake, despite this is fascinating, because despite what you see in terms of the state of the economy globally and here in the US, I've heard that private equity sitting on a lot of cash right now. We could start seeing towards the latter part of this year a lot of more mergers and acquisitions as they're sitting on a lot of cash. So I heard that from a pretty reliable. I don't want to say because I don't want to expose what I do, but again, go ahead. PG.
Yeah. So we know that the Xbox brand is honestly all about Game Pass now, right? They themselves have kind of admitted, like, whether true or false, that they don't care about actually selling games and hardware sales. So it's all about the subscription service for them. Does being all about a subscription service increase the requirement for you to produce AAA games more or less? Well, what would y'all say?
Well, normally it would, but the dynamic that we have in the market now, and that is part of the Xbox consumer base, is we have a lot of that being flooded and populated with indiscriminate customers whose only requirement is low cost of access. And so they don't have the requirement, right? I mean, so for a year and a half now, I've been jumping up and down on a table, setting a trash can on fire about the fact that there aren't the day and date first party AAA summer blockbuster titles in the subscription service. but they have a large fan base and a large customer base that doesn't care. All they care about is that they have the low cost of access. And so, gentlemen, what this all brings us to, and Falky kind of stepped into it, and he and I have been chatting about it a little bit on Twitter, is we're standing on the precipice of the devaluation of the industry, because we have a market force that is primarily oriented around low cost of access with no other requirements, which will now become a competitive factor because we've allowed, or we're potentially allowing, the consolidation of supplier power within the barter exchange system between Microsoft and Activision to capitalize on that, versus market forces that would have an insistent demand on quality, constantly dragging the market and the industry forward and evolving it to meet those requirements. And so what we're going to have is we're going to have a dynamic where there is going to start to be a lot of orientation around low cost, minimum technical acceptability, as we're kind of seeing now, and customers, as gaming continues to go more and more mainstream and less about quality, right, participating in expanding that market share. And the risk will then be how those market forces then drag the industry down and make it difficult for companies who are focused on quality to compete.
So pretty much, you're saying that, you know, I guess consumer demand for them to continue to create AAA games at a good rate isn't required with them being all in on subscription. It isn't like it doesn't increase it.
There's no driver to require it. Because you can't. I shouldn't say you can't correlate.
Like to increase and maintain their sub count, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll use Starfield as an example. In this, I have a suspicion this is what will happen, but I'll use it as an example. Starfield comes out and it's it's treated like a blockbuster AAA game, right? Massive hype, all the rest of it, marketing campaign, all that, and it doesn't move the subscription count one bit. Is that a success or a fail?
Yeah, that's kind of what I think about, right? I don't know, like I don't know, like because they, you know, the reports have said that not only Game Pass but all subscription services like for the past year or so have been completely stagnant. They're staying like kind of exactly where they are. Is that a good thing or a bad thing for Microsoft? Like, or is that fine? I don't know. Well, I'm really asking.
Well, Microsoft's last financials, round numbers, Microsoft was $17 billion in revenue. Xbox, sorry, $17 billion in revenue, which is less than 10% of the total Microsoft revenue. It's about 8%. $17 billion in revenue. Say 3.5 of that, rounded numbers, was hardware sales. So now we're down to 13.5, and we know that that the subscription services revenue was only at best $2 billion, because I said 10 to 15% of gaming revenue. So at best, the subscription service generated, the subscription services generated $2 billion, which means there's $10 billion of revenue coming from somewhere. People are buying something. So, what is it? What are they buying? Is there that much microtransaction, or is the sub-services that poor? We know if they were paying full bang, they'd barely crack $4.5 billion in revenue if they were paying full $15 a month for 12 months, and including service fees and all the rest of it, they couldn't even crack $2 billion. So, the numbers, the subscription numbers have stagnated. Console sales for Xbox have stagnated. The only real expansion point now is in the PC market, but even then that's starting to show signs of hitting its peak. It's not looking good. And if they're going to bet the house on that as a future, there's no way they're going to have enough money to fund AAA games. And that's the other problem. The desire to build them might be great, but if you've got no one to pay to fund them, and again, Starfield, if you spend $200 million building a game that doesn't make any difference to your revenue generation as what a $10 million or a $5 million indie game does, what's better value for the consumer? Would you want one big game every 5 years, or do you want the 10 or 15 or 20 games every year.
Another quick question.
That's where the economics. Sorry.
That's
Another
what
quick
I thought it
question.
was telling when Phil Spencer said that they weren't going to make $200 million games. They're going to make $80 million games and $60 million games. They weren't really looking to make these big budget games.
Mm-hmm.
That's why.
And I wanted to know, like, let's say, like Phil Spencer has said, Game Pass is profitable. I'm not going to argue with the man. I believe him. If he says it's profitable. He knows. I don't know anything. He knows more than me. But let's say it's at some point it's not, or they like there's a loss on it, that they start to take a loss on it. Would they just continue to eat that cost for like forever, or would there be a point where they were just like, we got to do something? Like
depending if the loss
they got
becomes,
so much money, So
but that's the thing. If when the big end, so they've got the three main segments. When the big segment is making the big dollars, down the bottom can be carried, and it just gets no focus, provided that it's not bleeding too hard. But now with the turnaround in how things are going, the big segment's not making the big dollars it was, and it's starting to lose ground to Azure. Azure's starting to lose ground to Amazon and Google again. So if the focus becomes up there, that's where they want to put their investment, and that's why I'm a bit dubious about whether this thing will, even though it'll get approved by the regulators, Microsoft might decide to walk away from it if they need the cash to do something else. If they need to invest in their main big money maker, the ones down the bottom will be the first ones that get axed, and Microsoft is unfortunately in that bottom three at the Xbox, is in that bottom five at the moment. So if they decide to change the way that they report things and the way that they cost them, because at the moment they don't, the cost of the server blades and the Azure back end and all the rest of it, because it's all internal, Game Pass as a business unit isn't getting any expenditure costed against it for that. It's basically getting it for free because it's still sitting up in the big parent company. The other divisions basically wearing the cost for it, and that's in their financial statements. That's a known. That's not a shady practice. That's an accepted business practice. So when he says it's profitable for them, yeah, it's profitable for Xbox because they're not having to cost everything against it at market rate. So, and that's fine. That's fine. But what will happen is if it goes to a loss position and that loss is less than 10%, and provided the top end's making big money, they'll carry it for a couple of years. If that loss starts to get up closer to 20% or more and the top end starts to show fatigue, they'll start putting the razor to it real quick. And they've shown that they're prepared to do it at a level because they did it earlier this year, and they're about to start doing it again. So, but then do you use it as a, do you launch your games day and date? Look at, again, Starfield, base games in their day and date, but you want all the additional stuff. You got to pay your $20 or $40 or whatever it was to get the deluxe premium edition or whatever it is. It may be that games going forward is in that hybrid manner. So they're generating revenue off the game initially, but they're certainly not generating the level of revenue that they would otherwise if they just sold it and then put it in there 12 or 18 months later.
Yeah.
But it comes down to the habits of the consumer.
Yeah, let me grab this.
If they don't, if you.
Yeah, go ahead, Falky.
No, you're right. You want to grab a super chat?
Yeah, I want to grab the super chat real quick. JD Gamer with a $5 super chat again says, people are quick to point out Xbox's failures, but they rarely acknowledge their success. Here are some: Psychonauts 2, Forza, Minecraft, and Wasteland 3. Wasteland 3 is kind of an interesting one to list there, but thank you for that super chat, JD.
What? None of us are sitting here shitting on Xbox. What's the problem?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not shitting on them, but I'm going to tell you from a performance perspective, those four titles don't move the needle in the way that you're claiming that they do. Psychonauts 2 is a great critical success. As BG said, right, moving Moving that studio to Microsoft gave them the financial backing that they needed to go out and do Psychonauts 2. Forza is a game that is an iterative release on a model that they put out, starting with Forza 3 on an older engine. It was plugged into the production pipeline because Turn 10 wasn't ready with the content they were supposed to have ready in 2020. So you may view that as a success, and this is my whole point of devaluation. There's a group of people who view that as a success. I don't. I mean, it's fine. It's a fine game. I've played a ton of it. It's there, but it's not the equivalent of what I was expecting and what I wanted. I'm not a big Minecraft player. It moves numbers and has high MAU, but I haven't seen Minecraft win any awards at the TGAs or DICE. So to me, it doesn't equate to the success that you're claiming that it does. And I'm not even sure where Wasteland 3 is on the map. I know it's a Game Pass, valuable game, and it's something people are interested in. But again, it's not a needle mover. It's not a summer blockbuster.
And I think when we talk about needle movers here, we're talking about the impact, I think, to the brand too, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, Logic, or anyone else on the panel. I don't want to speak for everyone here, but I'm under the impression we talk about moving the needle, though. We're talking about things that impact the brand, things that move. Things
that the brand's known for.
Yeah, and things that the brand's known for, things that move people or gravitate consumers to that particular brand. And if you just look at the obvious, right? If you look at the obvious, the thing that you should that should be the tall tale sign here of how specific games. I saw somebody try and downplay Horizon and Final Fantasy 16. Well, listen, I mean, the Final Fantasy franchise has had a history with the PlayStation console. It's often at times been synonymous with exclusivity with the PlayStation console. 16 just released. 7 was huge for the PlayStation 7 20-something odd years ago. But if you just look at like games that have impact that move the needle, and when we talk about moving the needle, at least when I think about moving the needle, I think about motivating people to go out and invest in that ecosystem or platform. Who are the dominant players in the console space right now? Sony, Nintendo. And where's Microsoft in that? They're in third place. And not that being
in third. Are we talking publishers or are we talking platform owners, though?
I'm talking about the console.
Yeah.
I mean, let's also consider that a primary factor, right, is how brand equity drives investment, right? We now know that that a large part of the reason why games are announced is to get them out in the public so that it's easier for the team to recruit, right? Because talent in the industry sees that, oh, here's this game being worked on. I'm interested in being part of that team. By the same token, these things that go along.
Logic, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. I just gotta. I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you real quick? And I apologize.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So, GKN Co. Who says Xbox fans are getting what they want as long as Microsoft is still interested in bringing games to them. Look, GKN, that's not true. I owned a Series X. I've been in the Xbox ecosystem for 20 years. They haven't been doing that for me. I mean, we're just getting a AAA current gen exclusive this September, and we're 3 years into the console generation. They haven't lived up to, for me, they haven't lived up to the marketing expectations that they set for the Xbox Series X as being the most powerful console this console generation. It eats monsters for breakfast. Halo Infinite was a huge disappointment for me. So I don't look for some fans, yeah, but not all fans. I don't think we can sit there and say that Xbox fans are getting what, because there's people in the Xbox ecosystem, Xbox consumers that aren't happy with what Xbox has been offering 3 years into this console generation. So I'm sorry, late game. I just want to just point that out real quick.
No, that's fine. I mean, like I said, I think the summary of all this and what's going on this week, right, is what it points to, even more so than consolidation. And going back even to the comment before, right, in my opinion, the risk and the problem with the question BG was asking about the subscription service and feeding the subscription service and the demand that we're seeing from the market is that when subscriptions stagnate, part of Microsoft's response to that is, if it can't get things out of the production pipeline into the subscription service to grow the subscription service, then they'll just go buy it. And that's part of the thing that I would be concerned about, right? Is that being the approach to getting the subscription service to kick back into growth numbers again and start getting people to pile on. But I think the biggest concern that I've seen coming out of this week is, like I said, is devaluation. And here's the indictment. Like I said, there are a lot of people who feel that their contribution to the gaming industry is going to be $204 a year. By definition, the remainder of that entry fee, and let's talk about, I'm going to orient it around what Ubisoft considers the hardcore gamer, which is, in short, the gamer that makes the industry really go and grow, which is the gamer that buys 10 new games a year. So as a baseline, that's a consumer who's spending $700 a year. And you have a block of buying power in the market now that is insistent that their price of entry for the year is going to be $204. You have problems that are going to crop up that are just simple, basic linear math, like the fact that, as I saw someone mention this week, they double dipped on Diablo 4, so they spent $140, and this acquisition going through will mean that next time around they don't have to pay that, or maybe they only have to pay $70. And so out of that, Activision Blizzard, which would have gotten $140 before, now gets cents on the dollar, or they get $70 plus some cents. It's pretty simple math to say, so given the level of effort and the investment that it cost them to make that game, they're now going to see less coming back from that kind of investment. That, by definition, means that two other actors in the market have to be subsidizing those people's consumption. Either Microsoft does, which if you agree that that's how it's getting covered down on, then you're agreeing on, again, a multi-trillion-dollar player operating in the business following a loss leader strategy to gain market share, which is problematic from an anti-competitive standpoint. Or, the thing that really chaps my ass about it, the rest of the consumers in the market who are paying the $700 or above are part of the people subsidizing it. So, either one of those things is problematic. And again, the force that's dragging things in the negative are the buying block of power that's oriented around only paying a $200 entry fee per year. That's, again, going to drive the industry and drive the market to doing the things that only need to satisfy that buying block of power who's spending $204 a year, who don't care about 60 frames per second, right? Who don't care about other elements of design and performance, who don't necessarily care about the number of AAA summer blockbusters being delivered per year.
So I got to go, but I want to say say one thing and reply to somebody in the chat. So all I can say is, listen, some Xbox fans are like, when they look at Game Pass and the type of games that go to Game Pass, they're very happy and very satisfied. So that's cool for them. When I look at the list and the type of games that go into Game Pass, I'm not saying there aren't good games in there, but those are not the games that get me like excited, right? I had this conversation with somebody. When you look at the top games that like the biggest games outside of Microsoft, it's not the biggest and best games that go into Game Pass. It's not, and I don't even think that's debatable. When you think about the biggest games of the year, whether it's Hogwarts, Resident Evil, Jedi, Dead Space, the biggest games and the best games, those are not what go into Game Pass, because the people who make those games know that our games are so good that people are willing to buy them. Game Pass are for games that may be good, but we don't have the confidence that people are going to buy them, right? Otherwise they would sell them, and that's not an insult to Game Pass. That's just what it is. Like, if you disagree with that, I don't know what you're looking at. That's what Game Pass is. It's for games that they up and I'm talking about on release, because of course some of these games go later, but it's games that they don't believe they have the selling power up front, so they'll take the money from Microsoft and all that. So what I'm saying is Game Pass, that's why like Game Pass isn't really for me, and like the type of games that go in there, it's not really my thing. And if that's the type of games that are for the future, that it keeps getting in the future, also not for me. And as far as like I forgot his name, but he said the Netflix, they want to be the Netflix of games. I don't think that's a good thing. Like like for gamers. I'm not talking. It's great for Microsoft and Xbox, but being the Netflix of games is not a good thing for consumers. When you think of Netflix, what do you think about? Netflix is literally when you go to a digital storefront and there's 1,000 pieces of trash and one good thing, maybe two, that come out every few months. That's what it is. It's shovelware and bullshit. Have you ever been on Tubi? You know that free app Tubi where you get free movies? It's the worst thing ever. It's pretty much when somebody, it's pretty much for people who make movies in their backyard. And like if I made a movie in my own backyard, you could put it on Tubi. That's Netflix isn't that far from Tubi. It's not that far. It's shovelware and trash that gets it's Netflix is shovelware and trash that gets something good like once in a while. So I'm not saying that's what Game Pass is. I'm saying I don't know why you would want Game Pass to be the Netflix. That's not a good name. Is my point. Like you don't want it to be the Netflix of games. That's all my point is. And that's all I really got to say.
Well, BG, no, I look, man, I appreciate your time. I know we typically go 2 hours and we're at 11:30 right now. So I really appreciate your time, and please let everyone know where they can find you as well before you leave.
You could follow me on Twitter, Broken Games HDR. My channel is Broken Games HDR, and we do Weapon Wheel podcast on Sundays. So appreciate it. Appreciate it, BRAP.
Absolutely, man.
David, B Money, Logic, great conversation, guys. Thank you.
Yeah,
sir.
Likewise. Thank you, BG. Appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah, the one other thing I wanted to add is BG's commentary, right, is exactly my point, right? Is that buying block of the market and people are pushing things in that direction. Understand that when people say things like that right, Game Pass is the Netflix of gaming, or that's what they want it to become, and that they're happy with that, right? What we need to understand is Netflix is not a luxury product. Netflix is a commodity. It kind of used to be a thing, right? That maybe kind of associated with not luxury, but like privileged access. But it's a commodity now. And that's what's happened with video streaming, right? As the years have gone on, it's become a commodity that everyone has access to. And it drives that quality breakout that BG was talking about, where it's 1,000 points of light of bad stuff in a very small number of really differentiated properties, which, as I've talked about on the show before, is what you kind of have to do with a subscription service. You will go broke trying to put super, super, super high quality stuff in a subscription service all the time. And so the path that Game Pass is...
Unless you're Disney.
Well, I mean, even Disney has its challenges with what it's been doing, right? And it's going to change.
Fumbling in the bag.
Yes, Ruby. Yes, Ruby. Yeah.
All that content that are put on Disney Plus is not quality content.
Well, no. If you look at the production values of some of the content, yeah, and I think that's kind of what we're alluding to when we talk about quality, the production values, right?
Yeah, you can have the greatest production value of the shittest story on the planet, and it's still a shit story. No one's going to want to watch it. Oh, yeah. Sorry. If I may chime in here, because I've got to go shortly as well.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Foggy.
2 quick points. And HD Gamer in the chat was talking about it before, and BG mentioned it as well. if the shift does, if this all plays out and it turns into that it ends up being a shovelware disaster full of games, full of ads and other microtransaction crap, because that's the low cost, high result end product, that's great. If people like that, that's great. It turns into mobile or console gaming, and fine, let it be. What they can't force the hand of is the consumer's behavior. If there are enough, and there will be enough, consumers that want to buy games and have the quality there and are prepared to support it, Sony and Nintendo will keep fronting up with another console, as long as there's someone there to support it. Now, we're talking about in terms of sales numbers and whatnot. Well, it seems pretty good that PS5's just about to crack 40 million, and the estimates that it'll lifespan will be just over 100. Well, that's great. 100 million consoles over a 7-year life, or 110 million consoles over a 7-year life cycle, and look at all the games that they're supporting to come through on it. If that potential outlook drops to 70 million, well, they'll still find a way of producing it, even though they might not be making as much in terms of dollars and volume, but they'll throttle the expenditure point on it to make sure they remain profitable. As long as there is a level of consumer demand supporting it, it will still exist. There's no reason to suggest at this point over the next 15 to 20 years that we're not going to have that. 15 years ago, consoles are dead. 10 years ago, consoles are dead. 5 years ago, consoles are dead. Don't look dead to me, and they certainly don't look dead on the outlook, because you've got hedge funds looking at investing in the area. So that's one part. The second part was around this Netflix of gaming. Has anybody been paying attention to what's going on with the streaming services and all that with the Writers Guild in America?
Yes.
Yeah, man. Like, oh, geez, you really want that to be that kind of power? Again, this is what the FTC's job is. If that's the level of influence and power that a couple of companies within a country can wield an influence, like you're seeing the reports coming through that they're just going to hold them out through the winter, and then when they start starving and can't afford to pay their rent, we'll just take them back at 4/5 of nothing compared to what they were making. And all the streaming services apparently, and all the movie studios and all that are apparently in on this. Is that really the sort of, comparative point you want to make? The only time in the last 3 years that since it came off its high as being the only one out there, the only time Netflix started making money was when they brought in that the low end one for $7 a month with ads in it. Do we want ads in our games? Are consumers going to cop that? Well, again, it might be great to sit back and say, hey, yeah, this is the future, but it doesn't entice me to want to pick up one of their products. I'd rather stay with paying a bit extra for the one I've got where I don't have to suffer the ads.
Yeah.
Well, Foggy, that's the concern I have, right? So the worrisome trajectory that this will take, right, as it has gone with other media, right, in industries and other industries in general, is, like I said, you have a burgeoning consumer base that's only focused on low cost of access, and as you grow out a subscription service that's like that, that's filled with that stuff, that has that low cost of access, now about to potentially combine that with mobile, right, which we know mobile gaming is crack for a lot of people who aren't gamers in the traditional sense that we would normally think. So if that consumer base is able to grow, right, then the problem becomes, like it has become problematic in so many areas, where the people who do have concerns of quality or do have concerns of any other requirement that needs to be met other than low cost of access, right, start to become the minority, and their needs stop getting met, at least in large numbers.
I feel like that's kind of what my experience this console generation was with Xbox.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, I know you've been gaming a long time, Brap. I've been gaming longer. That's what's been going on with gaming the whole time, right? As gaming has gone mainstream, it's gotten diluted. You and I have talked about who kind of the demographic used to be for gamers and how that demographic has gotten diluted, and now the customer base will get diluted, right? And then other things could become problematic. Yeah. I mean, where I land is I don't have a problem with Game Pass in general. What I have a problem with now is Game Pass being merged with Activision Blizzard as an IP property base, because that crosses the line of a threshold of a dynamic on the market. I'm sorry, go ahead, B Money.
I think that was fucking.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say it puts it in a situation where it can be weaponized as a platform, and
exactly.
It's not in an uplifting way. The most obvious way for any business leader to, when you've got that much available and that much focus on particularly what's coming into it, is you can use it to drive the consumer point and basically run it as a race to the bottom of who can get to the cheapest, the fastest, and make the other one go bankrupt. Again, that doesn't dictate the consumer behavior, but it will
influence it.
It can force a situation. So
yeah,
I mean that was my argument from the beginning. When the announcement was first made about the purchase, that was the first thing that I brought up, and everybody was looking at me like I was crazy.
Yeah.
I've watched the music industry do the same exact thing. The music industry is shit now. Spotify, Apple Music, all the streaming platforms have made it to where literally anybody can release music.
Yeah.
And what
and there's
happened?
No quality control.
No quality control at all.
There's no quality control. No. And what about the creators? Those that genuinely have a talent that are making something decent get lost in amongst all the other garbage because they don't have the funding to be able to stump up and engage with a record label. But even if they did, and I've spoken about this somewhere else recently, musical artists make nothing out of streaming. They make absolutely nothing out of streaming. If they can't sell their albums, then what else have they got left to do? They've got to tour. That costs a fortune. You look at some of the biggest ones on the planet. Was it last year or the year before? It might have been Bon Jovi. And he'd been around for a long time. Toured in the 12 months he was touring, $700 and something million generated out of the touring, and made less than $10 million out of his music streaming. He's away all year touring the world and big stadium shows, and again, massive amounts of money invested in doing that. But that's the return is probably 4/5 of nothing. If he sat at home and just left his music to be streamed and put on the radio everywhere, he's making nothing out of it. That's why Queen and all these other big artists, some of the biggest selling artists in history, are selling all the rights to their music because they're worth nothing to them. Yeah. Absolutely nothing. And B Money's exactly right. They'll do the same thing here if they're not careful, and the creators will end up just being worth nothing and not rewarded for it. And then how does that benefit the consumer when you get these cookie cutter, shovelware, 2-minute AI made games?
I feel like this is what happened in 1983, Logic. What Falky's describing, what you described earlier, Logic. Everyone talks about almost like the democratization of content on the Atari 2600, and
the great video game market crash of 1983.
Yeah, and E3. E3 kind of being the running joke that E3 killed the gaming industry. But that's basically what happened. There was no quality control. It was just video games galore.
Yeah, and I mean to sharpen up my theory, I don't think we're headed for the video game crash of 1983. Which again, and before any people in chat or anybody is naysayers against it, look, I don't want to hear from you unless you lived through it. I lived through it. I was a consumer on the market at the time. So, but I don't think that that's where we're headed. But I do worry about, I'll call it the mobile gamification of the gaming industry, right? Kind of like Falky's talking about, which is this, and I've posted some things on Twitter about price wars and what happens in a price war when again, low cost becomes the key differentiating factor in a market, right? That markets that go in that direction have bad ramifications, right? This is where things that you love, you see the commoditization of, right? As people race to the bottom. Brad, you got a super chat? Can you get that one super chat? I have one comment on to respond to JD Gamer.
Yeah, but real quick to your point
Yeah,
about
sorry.
okay. Well, actually, let me get that. Which super chat was it? Because there's a couple of super chats I got to catch up on here.
Yeah, it's this recent one about the
Hold on a second.
1 minute to say what might be good about the ABK deal.
Oh yeah, JD Gamer with the $5 super chat says, and I'll get the rest of the super chats here from you, JD Gamer. JD Gamer with the $5 super chat says, the panel at the panel, we've heard your arguments against the ABK deal and how it can make everything bad. Take just 1 minute and tell me what might be good.
I don't necessarily know that it's a net good of the deal, but I will say, and I have said this on the show many, many, many times, despite how people are all in their feelings with their brand alignment with Xbox, right? And I say the same thing to the PlayStation folks, right? The fact of the matter is that I have consistently said, in no way am I advocating for the industry to go down to two competitors as console platform owners. None of us benefit. And this is why I always say people who advocate for the death of Xbox or the death of PlayStation are people who don't truly love video games. And I'm not really here to have a conversation with those people, right? One of the arguments that Microsoft should have made, although they won their case for the PI, so I guess they don't need my legal help, is what they should have argued is, hey, we came into the market in 2001 as Sega was stepping out. If it weren't for Microsoft and Xbox, we would have gone to a two-competitor market, and that would have been bad for everyone. And so, despite my own feelings about Xbox's performance over the last 22 years, the fact of the matter is that they have played a critical role in market forces and market dynamics by providing a third core supplier. Without them, prices would have gone up. There would have been fewer choices. All sorts of bad things would have happened. So despite the problems that I have with their performance and them not measuring up, in no way am I ever advocating for the demise of Xbox. We need them as a competitor within the industry. Like I said, I have my problems with them and the market demographic that they're addressing and other things of that nature. But that is one good thing about the deal. If Microsoft is on the precipice of saying, hey, we've spent billions of dollars trying to compete and we've failed. The only thing that's keeping us in the game is Game Pass. That's a hypothesis that I have. If Game Pass hadn't been introduced last console generation, I don't really know what skin in the game Microsoft would have, given their performance during this generation. And so if the appetite of senior management, if Satye's appetite was, look, if you guys don't turn this into a viable thing, then I'm going to stop investing in it, or I'm going to kill it, or we're not going to keep doing this, whatever the case may be. If the acquisition allows them to continue to be a third competitor in the market, then I guess that's an overall good. I just don't believe that it's worth the possible damage that it could cause.
Yeah, that's a great point, Logic. Let me get the rest of these super chats for JD Gamer. JD Gamer with the $2 super chat says, he's talking to BG. Do you have Netflix BG data actually respond to him? And then JD gave me the $2 super chat against his question for the panel. Who liked She-Hulk? I didn't like it. What about you guys? Did anyone watch She-Hulk?
I didn't watch it.
No. B?
I watched 2 episodes and it wasn't good, so I stopped watching it.
Yeah, me too. What about you, Falky?
No.
No. Okay. Jeff B gave the final super chat. If someone eats McDonald's when they haven't eaten in days, it's the best thing ever to them. Same with gaming. Xbox has been starving their base. Thank you for that $5 super chat, Jeff B Gaming.
Sorry,
I got
there's
a
a
question for you
conflation
guys.
point here. Yeah.
Go ahead, Foggy.
No, I was just going to say there's a conflation point here. A lot of people in the chat seem to think that we're saying we don't like what's on Game Pass. It's nothing to do with that. There's plenty of little gems on Game Pass. The issue is it was sold as play the big games first here day one. Seen bugger all big games. Play the best games here day one. Seen bugger all best games. Play the big third-party games here on day one. Hardly any third-party games. And then you go off to the point of, well, what is the purpose of Game Pass? Well, it's a value proposition and defined value, but it's a cheap way of individuals getting into gaming. Well, that's great. That has a place in the market, but don't try and say that is the be all and end all of gaming, because as I said before, that thing barely generates $2 billion in revenue for Xbox out of a $17 billion a year revenue pool. So it's clearly not the be all and end all, but we're not sitting here saying it is. What we're saying is there's a potential for this thing to cause massive disruption and issues across the broader organization if it's weaponized with the bringing in these things that have never been in there before, and it devaluing the games themselves. That then creates a market situation, and I know a lot of people don't like the businessy side of it, but this is all about dollars. Do not think for a second that a company as big as Microsoft is not looking at the dollars. They are. They're not your gamer buddy. He's there to do a job, which is to make money. And it's the same with Jim and everyone else. If they employ that strategy and it drags everyone down with them, then it will capitulate the entire industry, and we'll be sitting here talking about how great, in 20 years, how great gaming was back in 2021, 22, 23, right before the thing fell on its ass. And it's a real possibility. That's why we're talking about it. However, it's not us that are current gamers that are going to cause this issue. It's the new gamers entering into the market. That's the focus point. If that's what they think is normal and that's what they think is value, then that will crash it for us. So, no, we're not talking about the games that are in the service, because there's a lot of good little games in there, and a lot of good AA games go in that service. It's the same with the PlayStation, the rest of them. There's nothing. We're not talking about the games. We're talking about what was promised, what hasn't been delivered, and what's potentially going to happen with it.
That's a great point, Falky. And I think we talk about the devaluation of gaming, and as it relates to Game Pass. And by the way, I've always said too on this show, Game Pass is a tremendous value proposition, but I don't think it's the end-all be-all. I know a lot of people tend to think it's the best thing since sliced bread. I think it's great for some consumers. I think there's a specific demographic that works, where Game Pass works well for. The low bar of entry is great, but we talk about devaluation, or at least how you guys have described it. I often look at the conversations that I see people have around Game Pass. You talked about the expectation, Falky, earlier when they revealed Game Pass. For me, it was like, oh yeah, big AAA. Play the biggest games. AAA first party Microsoft Studio games. And to me, it was like, okay, if I get three $60 AAA games out of during the year, or even two, plus some smaller AA or indie titles sprinkled into the mix, my ROI is looking good for Game Pass. But that hasn't been the case in my experience. And I know everyone's use case is different, but the devaluation and what I'm seeing here is, and I see it again. I know Twitter's a very small sample size, but when I look at my Xbox's performance this console generation, the fact that they just released their first AAA current gen exclusive, which was Redfall, which we know how that turned out. And now the second one is Starfield, 3 years into the generation. And people are like, oh, it's okay because we have 300 games in Game Pass. And I'm thinking to myself, well wait a minute. Like, so people are just looking at, it doesn't matter whether or not they release AAA first-party exclusives that take advantage of the hardware feature sets that Microsoft touted at the start of this generation and marketed heavily. What seems to matter is that, we got 200 titles. That's great. That for me personally, that's not something that works for me. So when you guys talk about this evaluation, that's what comes to my mind. from what I see with some of the chatter around Game Pass on Twitter.
And that devaluation cannot happen unless you've got big top end titles that have a large value within the industry suddenly being stripped of their value. Is if they get COD and they put it in the Game Pass day one, and I say if, it doesn't matter where else it goes. If they get COD and they bang it into Game Pass day one, that thing is effectively worthless. And the back end of that will be, they will be relying on sales on other platforms to backfill that revenue gap. And this is how crazy it is. There's a very real possibility that this thing closes, there's concessions put in place, and then all of a sudden, Microsoft and Xbox enact some kind of strategy where they pump all this stuff into Game Pass day one at bugger all dollars per month, or 3 months, or whatever it is they end up doing. It loses a ton of money, and the only way they get to a break-even point or reduce that loss is hoping and praying that it sells like crazy on PlayStation and Nintendo. Like, how crazy is that? That the success of their main thing is reliant on their competitor being able to sell their product.
Yeah. Interesting.
Might as well be a publisher. Just kill off the console, stick with PC, and go be a publisher.
Well, that's kind of leads into my question that I want to pose to the panel. Just say that deal goes through and they add all of the Activision ABK games to Game Pass. How do you guys think that relates in the relationship to the other big third-party publishers? You think that increases the likelihood that we start seeing other big games in Game Pass, or does it decrease, or does it kind of stay the same?
I don't think it will move the needle.
What about the relationship with the smaller publishers and smaller teams as far as getting their games in there? You think that affects it at all?
I don't think so. Mainly for the point of, look how little content comes out of ABK at the moment. If they do choose to basically say, right, ID at Xbox is, we're not even going to bother that engagement, and you can bring it to Game Pass at your own leisure, and which would be crazy because then the volume of games that are going to go in, they'll just deteriorate even worse. Once they have that massive hit of all the back catalogue that goes in there for ABK, the next step is what's coming next, and they'll be in exactly the same spot they are right this second. We've got a lot on the horizon, and we're really excited for the future. But just wait. And outside of the annual COD release, there could be years between other releases. So, I don't think it shifts the needle. They'd be crazy to give up on the smaller guys, because if they did, they're going to be in a worse situation.
Yeah. So B, are you? I guess. So to better understand your question, are you asking if this deal is going to move the needle for the Xbox? Like, is it going to?
No, I'm asking, is it going to change the way that other publishers and developers interact with Game Pass?
I think maybe. I think
now you have the biggest game sells every year in Game Pass, releases day one. So if it has a major impact to Game Pass and subscriptions, increase 20% or whatever, does that now encourage EA to say, all right, well, why don't we try Madden in there day one on Game Pass? Or why don't we try our latest Star Wars game, or wherever the case may be? I mean, like, I'm just trying to figure out or wondering what type of impact this will have on the other publishers as they kind of look at the landscape now that there are these big, massive, AAA games with high player count out on the service day one.
Logic, what do you? I'm going to throw this over to you, Logic. Because I think we talked about this before, maybe off air.
I'm sorry. Can you ask that question one more time?
Yeah, go ahead, B. I'm sorry, B.
He wasn't listening.
No. Well, B, let me answer real quick.
No, I was. I just want to make sure I answer the right thing. I caught bits and pieces of it.
Okay. Well, I'll answer real quick, B. I think for me, at least, with the potential impact of publishers, I think potentially, like, you know, the fact that now if you're a publisher, maybe, and we talked about, you know, the low barrier of access and, you know, paying less for content. I think potentially if you're a third-party publisher, maybe Game Pass is a competitor to releasing, you know, a traditional third-party retail release, you know, on that platform. Do you want to compete as a third-party publisher against Game Pass? Because, I mean, and again, I know it's a small sample size, but you look at some of the attitudes and the conversation around game releases. What do we see, B? What do we hear? Oh, I'll wait for it to come on Game Pass. Yeah. So if I'm a publisher, like, do I want to compete with Game Pass on the Xbox platform? And maybe on a platform, if you look at some of the, you know, the sales numbers of third-party games, you look at some of the Capcom. Look at some of the Capcom releases when Capcom releases numbers of sales of their games, and you break it down per platform. Microsoft, the Xbox platform, they don't sell a lot of games on the platform. I think if you look at Final Fantasy 15, I believe less than 10% of Final Fantasy 15 sales were on the Xbox One. I mean, so you look at potentially low sales of a game, and not that all games do bad on the Xbox. I don't want people to think that I'm saying that, but what I'm saying is that there are games out there by third-party publishers, and this will probably be a case-by-case. Games by third-party publishers, Capcom, if you look at the data, some of their games haven't really sold very well on the Xbox platform compared to the PlayStation. Same thing, you know, with some Final Fantasy games. So Final Fantasy 15 being the recent example. Couple that with having to compete with a service, a subscription service where you get access to 300 games at a low price point of, you know, $12, $15 a month. You may ask yourself as a publisher, is that something I want to compete with? Am I going to, is it make sense to allocate development time, resources, money to a platform that I have to compete against this low barrier of entry? The answer to that may be yes or no for some publishers. I think that's a potential side effect or impact.
Well, I mean, BRAP, you talked about what we've been talking about for, and right. I mean, this is my whole point. Is people make a big deal out of the exclusive deals that Sony, you know, makes in feeling that it's preventing games from going to Xbox. But people need to understand and acknowledge that developers are already making the choice to not go to Xbox, right? Because of that knock-on effect of Game Pass. Because, like, as I mentioned, you have a burgeoning addressable market that says things like, I'm not going to play it until it comes to Game Pass, but actually acts offended when there's a new game released on Xbox sometimes, not going to Game Pass. Like, those are market dynamics that, to me, are worrisome. I mean, I think if this deal goes through, what's going to wind up happening is that I think I'm sorry, go ahead, B-Money.
I was just going to say, you know, the way I kind of look at it is like, just say, you know, there's I don't know the exact numbers on COD yearly, but just say it's 20 million, and you know 5 million players or whatever the case is that they're buying a game on Xbox day one. The people who went out there and bought Diablo day one, these big tentpole games. Now games like that are now in your service, and in regards to Call of Duty, that typically that game would be releasing every year. It is now a service where now you're further encouraging that consumer to say, hey, I don't need to go out and spend $70 on, you know, the game that I normally would. You know what I mean? So why would I spend $70 on your game when I'm getting these great games in this service that I'm paying $15 a month?
Is that a question for Logic?
I was just saying, you know, because he was talking about how how it's going to affect, the other publishers and whatnot. And that's kind of where I'm looking at it from. It's like, okay, if I'm EA or if I'm Ubisoft, if I'm, these other big third-party publishers, consumer base of Xbox is now encouraged to say, I no longer need to buy your $70 game. I'm getting the games I used to pay $70 for, though they are now in my subscription. So why should I now give you $70? Now, is that going to encourage those publishers to now look at Game Pass in a different light, where it's more encouraged to put games there either day one or a lot sooner than they potentially would?
Yeah, I think that's the worry, right? Like Brad, what you're saying. I mean, you and I have talked about it. Like, that is the state now. The state that I'm concerned about is this deal goes through, those Activision Blizzard properties get weaponized, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying in a bad way, but like what would make sense to me, what I would do if I were Microsoft, right, is number one, I think that there's an addressable market of people who are at the low end PC space, right? Who are in the PC space, have aging hardware. We have the problems going on with GPUs, with cost and memory, NVIDIA, playing their shady games with dropping stuff to 128-bit buses and all that kind of stuff. And I think that there's a market there that's ripe to say, hey, for the time being at least, you can get a whole console for the cost of a GPU, for less than the cost of a GPU. And oh, by the way, we're going to take a bunch of stuff that you love playing on PC and now put it on console. Right? I mean, you and I have talked before, right? Yeah. Making a console version of World of Warcraft and putting that in Game Pass and making that accessible for the cost of your Game Pass subscription without charging them an additional cost for their old World of Warcraft subscription, that to me is a win, right? Taking a bunch of that Blizzard stuff and making it available on console, I think that will grow numbers. And so you could put that in as a wedge to capture that addressable market, grow your Game Pass numbers until the next thing, right, is ready or available. And then the other market force that's going to come into play is kind of, as Falky said, and I think you said it before at one point here earlier too, Brep, every day there's new gamers coming into the market. And every single day, and Brep, you and I have talked about this with cloud, right, with mobile, with touch interfaces, right? The way we grew up gaming is not what new gamers coming into the market are being normalized against. They are normalized against cloud. They're normalized against touchscreen interfaces. And absolutely, because so many of them have grown up in a subscription-oriented content consumption world, it is going to become natural for those new gamers entering the market, particularly your middle-class type of demographic, right, to immediately pad their consumption menu with subscriptions. And so if Game Pass is the thing and that can be normalized and it has a ton of additional content in it, in fact, if this acquisition goes through, with what is actually a bulk of the content that's available on the gaming market today, then you're going to start seeing a growing wedge of consumer base, right, that's oriented around that vector. That's new consumers in the market, not the legacy. And as those gamers get normalized to looking for content in the way that B-Money is saying, right? No, pay $70 for a game? No, the normal means of consumption is subscription, right? You have a lot of these Fortnite players, right, who literally, and it's actually a wedge of a generation, we've found that, like in the IGN surveys, who what's normal for them is to not pay for games, right? To just consume free-to-play, to be subsidized by the whales, right? To earn in-game currency while playing that game that they turn back around to buy the next battle pass. And so that type of behavior has the risk and potential for growing greater numbers and becoming normalized. And that's when I feel like you could start to see these market forces that say, hey, normally, and it's going to be a long time before it impacts something like FIFA, right? But where you could potentially see more and more titles start to be incentivized to go to Game Pass because they may potentially not sell the numbers that they used to sell as individual sales.
Yeah, that's a great point, Logic. I want to get some super chats here real quick. JD Gamer with the 10. What's that?
I've got an answer for that one.
JD Gamer said with the $10 super chat says, please give a logical and profitable solution for Xbox to compete with PlayStation that takes into account PlayStation using its market position to deny Xbox third-party games and Xbox starting with 5 studios last gen. Go ahead, Falky. Answer that one.
All right. So I'm going to list off about half a dozen or so things here, and then I'll expand briefly on them because I know others don't like listening to this all the time. Not so far as to mention that B Money and Logic have already spoken about this at length in previous podcasts. So the first thing you need to do is remove the requirement for any games coming to Xbox being available on Game Pass. Get rid of that requirement, and you'll get engagement from Japan almost immediately. Leverage the exclusivity clauses for games being in Game Pass. Either they're purpose-built for the service, or it can be on multiple services. Now, that might sound counterintuitive, but if I don't have to fork out 100% to get the game on my service, and I say, well, you can have it on mine and on PlayStation, I don't care, put it wherever you like, but I'm only going to pay X amount for it, the developer or the studio can go to the other guys and say, hey, look, I'm prepared to take less money, but I'm going to have it on another platform. So you're sharing the cost of having it available, and straight away you're taking away the leverage points of attractiveness for a lot of those games. That would be AA down. So that's stuff that's not big end, but from the middle down. They need to return or focus on using the subscription service as a support service, not a primary day one service. So you need to reset that messaging. Game Pass is not going to be the pathway forward in any kind of sustainable avenue, because you'll need at least 200 million subscribers at about $30 a month, and that ain't going to happen. That'll die before they get to that point. You need to engage with publishers to get at least a heap of AA level games into Game Pass. Don't have to be new, but you got to get them in there, because the stuff that goes in every month is absolutely rubbish. You need to put some value into that service. Make sure that you get games that equal the PS exclusive games onto the console. So Final Fantasy 16, yeah, great. That is a console exclusive for PlayStation. What's stopping Xbox from going and getting someone to build them one, or 2, or 10, or 20, or 50? Go and find some studios and publishers that'll build some games for you. And don't be afraid to pay for them, because that's the only way you're going to not break the market leadership part of Sony doing third-party exclusives, but there's nothing stopping you from doing the same thing. You just got to find those that are prepared to engage. Engage with studios to build games based on your current IP. Go and find a heap of studios that can build stuff that you own the IP for. Like this Banjo-Kazooie thing that popped up in the last couple of weeks. Who cares? It's going into Game Pass. Who cares? Go and get one built. You'll get subscriptions for a month because people will just go and get it to play it. It doesn't matter if it's on a console or a PC. Who cares? As long as they're paying the dollar for the month. But at least it gets them in the door, and then you can go on from there. They've got a heap of IP that they're just doing nothing with. They need to get some discipline into their first-party pipeline, actually get some shit out the door. And that's been spoken about ad nauseum. They need an overarching QA team in the organization, kind of like PlayStation Productions or Nintendo Productions oversight. They need some people at the top to make those hard decisions at the play test, so that things like Redfall don't happen. That thing should have been knocked on the head, should never have seen the light of day. They should have not bothered. And it's not fair to the development team to allow that to occur, and then for them to cop the backlash because management didn't make the tough decision, and then stand back and go, well, hey, look, that's all on you guys. It's got nothing to do with us. That just shows that your management's got no spine. They need to backfill this content drought with a heap of third-party games immediately. Get the checkbook out and go start knocking on doors, and just keep adding zeros to the back end of it until they say yes. It doesn't matter what you're paying for it. You have got to get more content onto your platform. You can't sit there and complain about the opposition keeping it from you, because there's plenty of games that go on Nintendo that could quite easily go onto the Xbox, and there's plenty of games that are on PC that could quite easily end up on Xbox. Just go and get them, and you've got plenty of money to do it. Then you need to stop the expansion programs immediately. Don't try and grow studios. Don't try and grow your brand and all the rest of it if you've got nothing there to fill out the demand for what's there. So stop the expansion programs and then go back to building value into your tentpole IP. It might be a joke that everyone says, oh, Xbox is just Forza, Halo, and Gears. So what? 3 very, very good IP properties that you can certainly build some excellent content around, and they do nothing with it. They tore Halo into shreds by making it a free multiplayer, and then the campaign was garbage, claiming to have spent $500 million to develop it. That's not a $500 million looking game. That's rubbish. Go and actually put some pride back into it and get some people in that will actually be able to deliver something, and just start building around those 3. You can the company, the organization, the platform itself can survive with 3 tent poles, because there's others that survive with 1, and you just need to have those maintain their value. However you distribute them, it's up to you. If you want to sell them as a main point, and then after 12 months or 18 months they go into Game Pass, and then, or you choose to go with the Game Pass on day 1 for the base model and pay for the premium, whatever you want to choose, just make sure that they are top shelf, setting the benchmark. Because at the moment, as a publisher, Xbox isn't even in the top 10, and everyone's, the Metacritic thing, like this, rubbish. They are leaps and bounds behind other third-party publishers, and they are not even in daylight sight of PlayStation and Take-Two and some of the top echelon guys. They're not even within sight. They need to get up to that point as a publisher to be able to get that back into their platform, and they really need to just make it happen. They've got the funds. There's no reason they can't go out and do it. They just seem to prefer to sit back and point the finger at others and go, oh, that's unfair because they've got a market dominance. Well, you can easily break Sony's market dominance in terms of the third-party stuff. You just need to get your checkbook out and go and start talking to people.
You know what? Real quick, Fucky. The issue I have, and I saw JD Gamer, and it's kind of been a narrative for the Xbox community. The issue I have with that Sony makes it hard for them to compete because of Sony's status. Well, remember the original Xbox launched 20-something years ago up against the behemoth of the PlayStation 2, and Microsoft, being an unknown, being unproven, was able to land second, third-party exclusivity deals with developers and other publishers. They did so because they were aggressive in writing their checks and fostering relationships, things like that. So I don't buy that that line of reasoning, because I've seen them do that and lock on. Like, I mean, come on, Ninja Gaiden was an exclusive to the original Xbox. Mass Effect was born on the Xbox 360. Panzer Dragoon, their relationship with Sega. I mean, Splinter Cell was born on the original Xbox, despite Sony's dominance. The Sony PlayStation 2 is one of the all-time best-selling consoles ever, and they were still, in light of that, able to procure third-party, second-party exclusivity deals. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yep, that was it from me.
All right, let me grab one more super chat before we wrap up here, gentlemen. Magnum Gaming with a $5 super chat says, no matter how good Game Pass may look, as long as Sony's around, they only cater to their existing base, thus making any efforts obsolete and a waste. Thank you for the super chat. All right, before we wrap up, any other closing thoughts, B-Money, Falky, or Game Logic?
Nope.
I mean, I think we had a pretty great show, great conversation. I don't think we were bashing Xbox or trying to hold PlayStation in regard. I think we had a great conversation. So hopefully that's what the audience took from it, and I think we were trying to put down one console over the other.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think everyone here on everyone here on the panel, I know we've talked about it behind the scenes. We all want to see a competitive Microsoft Xbox. A lot of I think many of the panel here, we have experiences with Xbox that date back 20 years. We remember when they were, really. I mean, again, I bring up Ninja Gaiden as an exclusive game that came to the original Xbox. You look at From Software bringing a Toji as a time exclusive to the original Xbox. Splinter Cell being born on the original Xbox. So many great games that came to that platform. And they were able to do so in light of Sony's dominance at that time 20 years ago, and as a new entrant, unproven entrant into console gaming. So, but I would say that everyone here on this panel does want to see them do well, because it's things that Game Logic mentioned earlier in the show about we don't want to see just two competitors in the console space. We want to see three viable options in the console space. So, but no, this was a great conversation. This is probably the longest show I've done in quite some time. 3.5 hours. So I appreciate everyone in the live chat who stuck around with us for the 3.5 hours. By the way, 141 people watching live right now. We only have 47 likes. Please smash that like button if you're new to the show. Please subscribe, hit the bell notification so you are alerted when we go live. We did get a couple new subscribers this evening, so thank you so much for those that subscribe to the show tonight. Really appreciate the support as always. And thank you everyone again in the live chat. And before we leave, I do want to give a big thank you to our guest, John Wolf, first-time guest, and BG Broken Games for joining us this evening as well. Also want to give a big thank you to Falky, who's on the other side of the world. Falky, thank you again for your time. And if you want to be found, let everyone know they can find you. Did Falky leave?
All right. Yeah,
there he is.
sorry, the delay. Yeah, so you can find me at Forky87 on Twitter. Drop us a line there if you want to have a chat. If you got any questions, queries, or comments about the show today.
Yeah, Falky, I need to DM you and pick your brain about these private equity firms. Because
there's something else, mate.
I tell you, I gotta have a glass half full perspective on the economy, man. At least here in the U.S. I can't speak for the rest of the global economy, but I don't know. I want to pick your brain. It'd be interesting having that conversation. So we'll have to
absolutely
chat. We'll have to chat in the DM. But Falky, thank you so much. And then Game Logic. I don't know if you want to be found, but everyone really can find you as well. If you want to be found, that is.
Nope, I don't.
Right. And B Money, I know everyone can find you at B Money 101 everywhere. I think that's right?
That is correct. That is correct.
All right, awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much again for your time. And I don't know if I'll be doing a BRAP rant this weekend. Maybe not. We'll see. But give me a follow on Twitter at BRAP_podcast. I always post on Twitter when I'm about to go live as well. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Enjoy playing video games, because ultimately that's what it's about, enjoyment. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you.